Picture yourself stepping into a world where basic everyday things, like the feeling of warmth from a sunrise or the taste of your favorite snack, could be part of a deeper mystery. This documentary invites you to explore questions so surprising that they might change the way you look at reality. Over the next 3 hours, you will follow a path through several mind-bending thought experiments that have fascinated philosophers and scientists alike. Each one takes a simple what if and stretches it until it challenges our most basic beliefs about life, truth, and what it means to be a living, thinking person. You will first encounter the possibility that our entire universe might be an incredibly detailed computer simulation. Imagine a future where someone, or something, has enough computing power to program galaxies, planets, and even people who believe they are truly alive. It might sound like science fiction, but some thinkers argue that if such simulations are easy to make, there could be countless fake worlds, making it more likely that we are living in one of those than in the single real universe. Whether you find this idea thrilling or unsettling, it raises big questions about whether there is any foolproof way to confirm we are not just coded lines in a cosmic program. From there, you will face the strange notion of a creature that acts perfectly human yet feels absolutely nothing inside. This puzzle points to the heart of what consciousness is. If we met a being that laughed at jokes, cried at sad news, and reacted to pain, but had no actual inner experience, would that being be any different from us on the outside? And how would anyone know? This puzzle reminds us that there is a difference between outward behavior and the private world of thoughts and feelings. It makes us pause and ask whether there is any sure way to look into another mind, or if we must simply trust that they are conscious like we are. Next, you will be invited to think about whether living a flawlessly happy life in a perfect virtual experience is worth giving up reality itself. Perhaps there is a magic machine that grants every wish, every success, and every pleasant moment you have ever dreamed of, yet you would never know it was all just an illusion. Should you plug in forever, or does real life, with its difficulties and genuine triumphs, offer something more valuable? Some argue that struggles, growth, and the authenticity of not knowing an event's outcome add a richness to life that no synthetic paradise can match. Others counter that if everything feels wonderful, who cares if it is simulated? The question goes straight to the heart of why many of us are drawn to the full range of human experiences. You will then peer into an idea called the Boltzmann brain, which suggests that in an extremely large or long-lasting universe, chance alone might create a single, lonely brain that appears out of nowhere, complete with invented memories and impressions of an entire life. For that brain, everything seems real, until it dissolves a moment later. This might sound like a tall tale, but it forces us to wonder if our own existence could be a random event, with nothing behind it but the cosmic roll of the dice. It also makes us question our confidence in our memories and in the stability of the past. Even if such a scenario sounds improbable, it highlights how fragile our sense of security in the world might be when we consider what randomness can do over immense scales of time. Finally, you will discover why our minds might sometimes prefer illusions to cold, hard facts. It could be that from an evolutionary standpoint, having a slightly skewed or overly positive view of ourselves, our chances, or the world around us can boost our willpower or help us avoid despair. Sometimes, seeing things more favorably than they really are might be exactly what helps us keep going when the odds are tough. This idea suggests that truth is not always the ultimate goal for our brains. Survival, motivation, and mental health can also matter. We might live with small self-deceptions that keep us striving, and these illusions could be part of why our species has done so well despite facing countless dangers over the ages. Each of these puzzles starts as a small, almost playful question, but quickly unfolds to show how our assumptions about reality, consciousness, happiness, and even the universe's size and age can all be turned inside out. Though these ideas may sound complicated, we will break them down with familiar stories, clear comparisons, and calm discussion. The purpose is not to convince you of any one conclusion, but to demonstrate how powerful a single what if can be in shaking up our usual view of life. Over the course of this documentary, you will also see that these thought experiments share a common theme. They each remind us that everyday appearances might be tricking us. Our world can feel so solid and well understood, yet all it takes is one carefully crafted puzzle to make us wonder whether we truly know anything for sure. Some people find this kind of uncertainty exciting, saying it inspires us to keep questioning and discovering. Others feel it is unnerving, since it suggests we might be floating in illusions we cannot easily escape. Whichever side you end up on, the trip is worth it, because it shows how a curious mind can see beyond the surface of ordinary life. You will hear from people who deeply believe one or more of these puzzles reveals hidden truths, and others who consider them mental games that reveal more about how we like to imagine things than how the universe really works. But in a sense, that debate is part of the fun. In each segment, you get to form your own thoughts on whether the puzzle might reflect something real about existence, or if it is just a thought experiment that tells us more about our fears and hopes than about the world itself. By the time the 3 hours are over, you will have traveled through the possibility that everything is a code, the question of whether anyone around you feels real emotions, the choice between raw life and a perfect fantasy, the eerie chance of a lonely brain popping into existence, and the idea that illusions may be more valuable than truth. It is a winding path, and it may leave you pondering which of your daily experiences you hold most dear and which you could live without. You may find yourself re-examining everyday certainties, like the trust you place in your senses or the value you assign to honest struggle. Though some of these ideas could be unsettling, take them as exercises for your imagination and your logic. They remind us that the most basic things, like the reality of the floor under your feet or the genuine nature of another person's feelings, can become questions for serious debate when viewed through the lens of these thought experiments. Maybe you will find yourself, late at night, wondering if there is a tiny glitch in your bedroom wall or if your best friend could be missing an inner world. Or maybe you will laugh at the absurdity of it, shake your head, and move on. Both responses are perfectly normal and speak to the power of big, mind-stretching questions. This introduction is your invitation to keep an open mind and be ready for a voyage across some of the strangest territories in modern thought. We will start with simulations and steadily move through each challenge to our notions of self, other people, and the physical universe. At each turn, we will hold up a mirror to the comfort zones of daily life and show that, with just a few words, those zones can be twisted in ways that spark awe, confusion, and sometimes delight. While there might be no final solution to any of these problems, there is real value in wrestling with them. They help us sharpen our wits, question what we assume is automatic, and appreciate the incredible variety of ways humans have tried to grasp the truth about existence. So take a breath, get comfortable, and let these ideas swirl around in your mind. Whether or not you come away convinced by any single experiment, you will at least see how vast the horizon of the human imagination can be, and how exciting it is to step beyond what we normally consider possible. Part 1. Are we living in a simulation? Imagine waking up one morning, feeling the covers on your bed and smelling something familiar like toast from the kitchen, then realizing someone is telling you that everything, your bed, your kitchen, even the smell of toast, might be part of a giant computer program. At first, it sounds like a scene from a futuristic video game or a wild science fiction story, but the idea that our world could be a super-advanced simulation has become a serious puzzle for many thinkers. People ask if the entire universe, including every mountain, star, and person, could exist only in lines of code run by a powerful computer. If that sounds confusing, you are not alone. The key question is whether, if technology ever got good enough, it could create a universe so detailed and realistic that the living beings inside it would have no idea they were in a simulation. To start understanding why some people take this idea seriously, picture how far we have come with video games over the last few decades. In older games, characters looked like simple blocks or had very little detail. Now, many games are full of richly detailed landscapes with grass swaying in the wind, water reflecting light, and characters who look and act almost like real people. Virtual reality technology lets you wear a headset so that when you turn your head, you see a complete new world around you, and your brain can be tricked into feeling you are really there. Think about taking that progress forward by hundreds or thousands of years. Imagine a future where computers are millions of times more powerful than what we have now. It is not hard to guess that eventually, people might design entire simulated worlds that are so lifelike no one inside them would notice anything strange. People often call this the simulation hypothesis, a big phrase meaning that our entire universe might be a carefully built virtual environment. To get a handle on it, consider that, if it is possible, to create a universe simulation, there could be more fake universes than real ones. This happens because once a civilization is advanced enough, they might not just make one simulated universe, but many, maybe for scientific experiments, historical recreations, or just for fun. Then you end up with countless simulated worlds floating around, each full of people who think they are real. Meanwhile, there would be only a single original universe where the advanced civilization lives. If you imagine picking a random person from all these worlds, it seems more likely that you would pick someone from one of the many simulated worlds rather than from the single real world. That is the quick argument for why some believe we might be in a simulation. It does not mean it is definitely true, but it suggests we cannot rule it out as easily as we might think. Naturally, a lot of objections come up. One big objection is that simulating an entire universe down to every star and galaxy might be impossible, even for a civilization far more advanced than we can imagine. Perhaps the sheer number of atoms is so huge that even the best future computers could never handle the calculations all at once. But supporters of the simulation idea say maybe it does not have to calculate everything continuously. Think about how many video games only show you the area that your character is in at that moment. The game does not waste computer resources on parts of the world you cannot see. By analogy, the simulation of our universe might only load or fully compute things when someone looks at or measures them, saving an enormous amount of processing power. So maybe there is no need for the simulator to track every single atom in every corner of the cosmos. It can be smart, giving detail only where and when it is needed. Another question is whether advanced civilizations would want to build so many simulations. The argument that we are likely in one depends on the assumption that future beings find it desirable to create entire universes full of virtual people. Some guess they might do it for research, to see how societies grow or collapse under certain conditions, or to watch how civilizations respond to challenges. Others suggest entertainment, maybe it is an extremely immersive form of gaming for them. Or they might run these simulations in large computer labs for historical curiosity. Imagine if you could watch how ancient civilizations might evolve differently if certain events changed. So there are many possible reasons, though we do not know the motives of hypothetical advanced beings. Skeptics say we have no guarantee these reasons would hold or that such civilizations would even exist for a long time. Still, it is not impossible to picture at least one civilization that tries it out. If you are thinking this sounds a bit far-fetched, you are not alone. But part of what makes the simulation hypothesis interesting is that it is tough to disprove. If you tried to run experiments to see if the universe might show signs of computer code, the hypothetical programmers, if they are that advanced, could hide those signs or correct them instantly. Or maybe they built the simulation so perfectly that it does not need corrections at all. Some people compare this to a cosmic version of that old thought, what if the entire world is just a dream? Except instead of dreaming, it is a computer program. If the simulation is good enough, you might never spot a glitch. And if you do spot something, it might just be a normal unexplained phenomenon or a coincidence, not necessarily proof that we are in a digital world. So from a scientific viewpoint, the simulation hypothesis can be frustrating. It is an idea that could, in principle, explain everything but that we cannot easily test. Yet, some thinkers do propose ways we might notice telltale signs. For example, if everything in the universe is stored in some kind of digital format, there might be a smallest possible unit of length or time, a kind of pixel for reality. If we discovered that space or time is pixelated, that might hint at a coded foundation. Others say that certain weirdness in quantum physics, where particles do not pick a definite state until measured, might be like a game's optimization that only fully renders objects when the player looks at them. But mainstream physicists typically have other explanations for these quantum effects that do not involve a hidden computer. So we are left with an open question: if the simulation is at all glitchy, we might find a clue someday, but if it is perfect or self-correcting, we would have no way to know. Another angle people bring up is how we would feel about discovering we are simulated. Suppose you found out that you are basically a character in a super advanced computer program. Some folks would feel like everything becomes pointless. Why bother if it is all fake? Others would say it changes nothing. A simulated headache still hurts. A simulated friend can still bring happiness, and in day-to-day life, your experiences remain just as real to you. Some might even get a thrill, wondering if they could contact the programmers or break out of the rules. As with many philosophical debates, there is no single correct emotional response, just an array of possibilities that reflect different personalities and beliefs. You might say that if the entire world is code, so what? You still have to get up in the morning, keep yourself healthy, and find meaning in your life. Real or simulated, the day feels the same. One of the fun but more out there ideas is that if the simulation has creators watching, maybe it is a giant experiment. They might see how we handle moral choices or big challenges. Some people compare that to older beliefs in gods who watch over us to see how we behave. The difference is that here, it is a super advanced programmer with unimaginable technology. Another related thought is that the simulation might switch off if it gets dull or if we become destructive, so we had better keep it interesting or positive. This is, of course, speculation. But it shows how easily the concept can spill over into everyday concerns about what we do and why. Imagining the entire cosmos as a stage for an invisible audience might make you reflect on how you live. If we step away from the cosmic perspective, the simulation hypothesis also ties into big questions about free will, because if everything is coded, you might wonder if your choices are just outcomes of a program. But that worry is not limited to the simulation idea. Plenty of philosophers already question if the laws of physics fully determine everything that happens, including our thoughts. The simulation argument just adds a new flavor, swapping out the usual physical determinism with computational determinism. In either case, we face the question, are we really free to choose, or are we following a script, be it the script of physical laws or lines of computer code? There are also those who say this entire idea is not new at all. They claim it is a modern rephrasing of ancient doubts, like the old question, could life be a dream from which I have not awakened? Or could an evil demon trick me about everything I perceive? Now, instead of calling it a demon, we talk about advanced software. But the core concern is the same, that our senses might be unreliable, not because they malfunction, but because the entire environment is artificially produced. The difference is the futuristic spin that focuses on computing power rather than magic or demonic illusions. That shift resonates with our digital age, where we see how easily modern computers can fake pictures, videos, or entire experiences. So it is a reflection of how our culture updates ancient philosophical puzzles to match our modern technology. Still, many real scientists remain unconvinced, pointing out that running a simulation of the scale of the universe sounds unbelievably huge, or that maybe advanced civilizations do not do such a thing. They might have moral or practical reasons not to toy with conscious digital beings. they might run out of resources or find more interesting projects. And from a purely logical standpoint, you cannot deduce that they definitely will run many simulations, so the entire probability argument might collapse if your initial assumptions are shaky. That leaves us with the possibility that the entire argument is just an imaginative scenario that cannot be ruled out but also might not be that likely in reality. Regardless of whether you think we are in a simulation, considering it can highlight an interesting point about how we trust the world. We often assume that if we can see, touch, taste, smell, and hear something, it must be truly out there. But a perfectly realistic simulation could feed our senses precisely the signals they would receive in a real physical environment. Our brains process these signals the same way. So if that is possible, the reliability of our senses depends on living in a realm that is not faking them. This is part of why some philosophers say we cannot be 100% certain that the world is what it seems, though practically we still act as if it is, simply because we have no better alternative. The simulation idea is part of a group of lines of thought that remind us it is not easy to prove we are not in a dream, a hallucination, or an elaborate artificial environment. Yet we keep living our lives, because we must. If you ask how this ties into everyday life for a typical person, the simplest answer is that it probably does not change how you make breakfast or do your homework. But as soon as you lie down at night and wonder about the universe, it can be an eye-opener. It reminds you that reality might be deeper or more flexible than it appears. And it might help you appreciate what you have, because even if it is code, it can still be experienced. Some people find it comforting to think there might be someone out there running things, akin to how religions propose gods. Others find it unsettling, thinking it reduces life to a cosmic science project. Either reaction can lead to interesting reflections. There is also the notion that maybe we are in a partial simulation that only focuses on a certain region, like Earth, and the rest of the cosmos is basically filler data that the program provides only when we point telescopes at it. That would still be a huge feat, but less than simulating all galaxies at once. It is kind of like how some open world video games do not render the entire map in high detail constantly, only the area where the player currently is. Then, if a new star is discovered by astronomers, maybe the code generates the details of that star at that moment. This might sound funny, but it is one way people have tried to work around the idea that a full simulation might be too large. The program does not have to store everything if no one is looking. The flip side is, if it is a perfect simulation, it includes all the history from the Big Bang onward, shaping stars, planets, and eventually life on Earth. That means the programmers either let it run naturally from some initial conditions or cleverly inserted a backstory so that we remember a long past, even if it did not truly happen in a physical sense. If you imagine loading a saved game, maybe the advanced beings can skip around or replay certain eras, watching them unfold differently. This leads to the mind-boggling thought that, if we are in a simulation, it might not even be chronological in the way we experience. The big events of human history might be rearranged or paused at times we do not notice. Again, it all depends on how advanced the hypothetical creators are, how they handle time, memory, and rewriting data. People also ask whether we might become the creators of simulations ourselves if we are not in one already. Could our technology become so strong that we start building mini-universes with digital consciousness? Then the question becomes, do we have moral responsibilities toward those simulated beings? Should we treat them with kindness or avoid letting them suffer? If so, that raises the possibility that our own creators, if they exist, might have moral responsibilities to us. Are they fulfilling them? Or do they treat us as experiments, letting tragedies occur for their research? This moral dimension can be quite unsettling, suggesting that all of human suffering might be an unfortunate side effect of someone's cosmic game. It also can lead to a tinge of anger or frustration. How dare they do that? Or maybe they do not see it as wrong if they do not view our experiences as genuinely real. It is one more layer of philosophical complexity. The entire discussion, though, would be quite pointless if advanced civilizations are not real or do not bother with giant simulations. That is why some critics call it a big if. A popular stance is to say, yes, a perfect simulation might be possible in theory, but we have no good reason to believe anyone has done it. That is a fair stance, yet it does not fully dismiss the scenario. Another set of critics goes further, contending that the entire concept is misguided because the energy and memory needed to simulate even a single planet down to the atomic level is astronomical. Or maybe consciousness is not something that can arise from lines of code, so any simulated beings, no matter how advanced, would be zombies without true awareness. Then, ironically, if we do feel real consciousness, that might suggest we are not in a simulation. But that depends on whether we believe consciousness can be replicated by purely computational means. Philosophers and scientists disagree on that question, connecting it to theories about how the brain creates mind. If consciousness is purely physical, then maybe code can mimic it if the code is clever enough. If consciousness is something beyond physics, maybe it cannot be faked. So the simulation idea ties into consciousness research as well. In simpler terms, if your day is going normally, maybe you are at school, you talk to friends, you do your assignments, none of it screams I might be in a simulation. Yet the concept creeps in at night or in quiet moments, reminding you that everything you rely on, from the ground under your feet to the sky above, could be generated by a system so sophisticated that it leaves no trace of artificiality. Thinking about that can be humbling. It also can lead to wonder, how magnificent must that technology be, if it can produce so many living minds who each believe they are in a real world. One reason the simulation argument stands out is that it intersects many areas: computing, physics, philosophy, ethics, even religion. It touches on the big question of creation, the nature of reality, the meaning of consciousness, and whether or not we can trust appearances. Some love it for this broad scope, while others say it is too big, mixing speculation from all sides without solid evidence. Yet part of the power of a thought experiment is that it does not require immediate evidence to challenge your normal viewpoint. Like reading a fantasy book that proposes a new world, this philosophical puzzle invites you to imagine a scenario that flips your assumptions. Suppose we try to imagine ourselves in the advanced civilization's shoes. We have reached a point where we can run entire universes as software. We might do so to watch how life evolves, or to test theories about how societies form. If we want the people inside the simulation to behave authentically, we would not program them to know they are simulated. We would let them discover or not discover it on their own, or create illusions, so they never suspect. Over many simulated years, these artificial people might invent their own science, religion, or mythology to explain their existence. They might guess at the possibility of being in a simulation but have no means to prove it. We, as the programmers, might watch them like characters in an enormous, interactive show, taking notes or changing parameters to see what happens next. This perspective is quite cinematic. We become the watchers over a blossoming digital cosmos. From your perspective, inside that cosmos, everything would appear to follow consistent laws of nature. If the programmers do not want you to see behind the curtain, they might ensure that any cosmic event that could reveal a bug is replaced by a natural explanation or never occurs at all. Or maybe they let small anomalies appear to see if we can puzzle them out. You can frame it as a cosmic test. Do we figure out the truth, or do we remain certain that we live in a physical universe from the Big Bang onward? If we do figure it out, maybe that is the next stage of evolution. Or maybe they simply have a game over scenario. We cannot know. It might be a question that extends beyond the boundaries of human knowledge. At the individual level, whether you or I accept or reject the simulation hypothesis might rely on our personal comfort with uncertainty. Some people thrive on imaginative leaps, saying, sure, the world could be a program. Others need concrete evidence, so they remain skeptical until something forces them to reconsider. Yet the puzzle can still have a subtle effect, reminding us that illusions can be extremely convincing. It points to a deeper lesson about trusting your senses. As advanced as you might think you are, you can still be fooled by well-crafted illusions. In daily life, we see illusions all the time. Magicians trick us, optical illusions fool our eyes, digital technology can fake voices and faces. The simulation idea is just a cosmic version of that, multiplied by an unimaginable scale. Now, is there a simple way to see why some get intrigued by the notion that being in a simulation might be more likely than being in a real universe? It all goes back to the counting argument. If advanced civilizations create these simulations, each real universe could spawn many offspring universes. Each of those simulated worlds might in turn produce advanced beings who build their own simulations, and so on, making a branching tree of realities. At some point, the number of simulated realities dwarfs the single trunk of original reality. That means if you randomly wake up as a conscious entity, the chance of being in that original trunk is small. The best guess is that you are in one of the numerous branches. The catch is you need to believe that advanced civilizations find it easy or worthwhile to spawn so many simulations, and that consciousness can exist in them. If either step is wrong, the argument falls apart. But it remains a possible scenario that some find logically consistent enough to take seriously. When people say, I think it is 50% likely we are in a simulation, or I think it is 99.9999% likely, they are usually referencing this line of reasoning. Others might say the chance is near zero because they doubt the premises. So it ends up being an open debate with no final consensus. That is also part of the reason it is popular. It is an unsolved, mind-blowing puzzle that touches on the meaning of existence. People love big, unsolved mysteries, especially ones that make them feel they might be living inside a story bigger than themselves. On a more personal note, you might ask how the simulation idea relates to your own sense of wonder or curiosity. For instance, does it inspire you to look at everyday details with renewed fascination, thinking, what if this leaf or this puddle or this rainbow is just the program's latest rendering? Maybe you find beauty in the idea that everything is designed. Or maybe it drives you to appreciate the realness of your personal choices, even if it is code-based, because the experiences remain genuine to your mind. Some discover that it sharpens their desire for scientific discovery, as they wonder whether studying reality might eventually reveal hidden corners or patterns that expose the code. Others let the idea rest in the background as a distant possibility, continuing to value family, friendships, art, and nature as they always have. However, if the concept weighs on you negatively, making you feel small or manipulated, you can remember that every day you live is rich with sensations and achievements that matter to you. Whether it is coded or physical, the pain of losing a loved one or the joy of finding success are real to your consciousness. People have felt the same about the possibility of illusions or dreams for centuries. They either choose to treat them as interesting possibilities or find comfort that, illusion or not, their life is meaningful to them. The same perspective can apply to the simulation puzzle. Even if everything turned out to be lines of code, your feelings and actions remain significant from your viewpoint. Some also note that if the universe is a simulation, it might be that the laws of physics are artificially stable. For instance, the speed of light might be a set parameter in the cosmic software, or certain constants might be typed in. Then, one can wonder if we might hack the laws, but that again leads to a big maybe. If the code is locked down, we might have no chance. If the programmers left a secret admin panel, it is a matter of discovering it. This line of thought can become almost playful, imagining secret cheat codes in reality. While that might be more reminiscent of fantasy or science fiction, it is an example of how the simulation idea can lead to unusual daydreams about changing the fundamental rules. If we never find such codes, we presumably remain bound by the system, just as we do if the system is a genuine physical reality. Another big piece is whether advanced computing can make truly conscious beings or just clever robots that behave as if they feel. That question transitions nicely into the next major philosophical puzzle about philosophical zombies, which are creatures that do everything like a person, talk, laugh, cry, but have no internal sensations. If consciousness can arise from computation, then a well-made simulation can fill itself with genuinely aware inhabitants. If not, then these inhabitants might be illusions of consciousness. In that second case, either we ourselves might be illusions or we might be the only real consciousness while others are just script-driven. Both possibilities are unsettling or at least thought-provoking. They show how the simulation question and the question of consciousness link together, each complicating the other. It is worth noting that some skeptics point to a simpler approach. If the simulation hypothesis is untestable, it might not be a fruitful path for science. But from a philosophical perspective, untestable ideas can still sharpen our understanding of what we think reality is. We do not adopt them as proven facts but keep them as background considerations. There is a long tradition in philosophy of exploring such thought experiments to clarify beliefs about knowledge, existence, and meaning. The simulation scenario is just one of the latest, and most, tech-flavored additions to that tradition. Where does that leave us? Probably in a place of wonder and uncertainty. The question, are we living in a simulation, sits in that space between the imaginative leap and a logical argument that says it might be statistically likely, yet we cannot confirm it. We can, however, see that it shakes up our trust in what we see around us, encouraging us to reevaluate how we define real. The best payoff might be that it nudges us to stay humble. If everything we sense could be artificially generated, then a dose of humility about our ultimate knowledge is wise. Similarly, it can instill awe at the idea that future computing could be so incredibly powerful. Or it can push us to reflect on moral issues if we think we might be players or characters in a grand cosmic experiment. As you digest these ideas, you might find that they spark conversations with friends and family. People might ask each other, would you want to know for sure if we were in a simulation? Or if it is all code, do we really choose our paths, or are we just acting out a script? Those discussions illustrate how philosophical puzzles can slip into everyday life, not just remain locked up in academic texts. Even if the conclusion is we just cannot know, the act of asking can expand your mental horizons and perhaps make you more open-minded about other large questions you encounter in life. You might also recall how illusions can be entertaining but do not necessarily damage the significance of experiences. Some folks compare the idea of living in a simulation to being a character in an author's book or a well-done movie. The story can be moving, full of genuine drama, sadness, joy, and growth for the characters, despite them being fictional in some sense. If we are like that, maybe our experiences still count just as strongly from our perspective, even if we are fictional or virtual. This is an attitude that says, meaning is found in how we live and experience things, not necessarily in whether we are physically real in some original sense. That might bring comfort to those who worry about losing meaning under the simulation scenario. Yet, it is perfectly okay if you feel skeptical or dismiss the idea. Many scientists do, feeling that it is a neat concept but lacking any sign or reason to incorporate it into mainstream research. Others remain neutral or open to it as an outside possibility. The point of including it in this documentary is to show how a single suggestion can twist your usual understanding of the world in a profound way, fitting with the overarching theme that reality might be more surreal or flexible than we tend to believe. The simulation puzzle stands as the first major puzzle here, setting the stage for further questions about consciousness and illusions that we will explore in the next parts. If you find yourself craving a final answer, you might not get one, because that is the nature of big philosophical mysteries. They often remain unsolved, or lead to new angles each time you think about them. The real payoff is how they train your mind to handle possibilities. Whether you lean toward maybe we are in a simulation or probably not, you have taken a step into a zone of deeper questioning. And that is where we want to be as we move to our next major challenge, which focuses not on the outside environment, but on the inner world of feeling and experience. There, you will discover a puzzle about creatures who might talk and act just like humans, yet have no sense of feeling inside. That puzzle invites you to look at consciousness in a fresh way, just as the simulation puzzle invites you to see reality in a fresh way. So, let the simulation hypothesis rest in your thoughts for a while. Picture advanced computers building galaxies and life forms. Consider the possibility that your daily routines, your laughter, your sadness, and your ambitions could be part of a cosmic code. Decide for yourself how likely or meaningful you find that scenario. But even if you conclude it is highly unlikely, the act of exploring it has already served a purpose. It expanded your sense of what might be hidden behind the surface. And now, with that sense of wonder awakened, you are ready to move on and explore the possibility that not everyone who looks human necessarily has an inner life. That next question might seem equally bizarre, but it goes right to the core of what it means to be truly alive and aware. Part 2. Philosophical Zombies. Imagine spending your day talking with your best friend, sharing jokes, confiding in each other, and seeing them laugh at the right moments or tear up when hearing sad news. Now picture someone telling you that, in spite of all the outward signs, your friend might have absolutely no inner world, no feelings behind the smiles, no genuine ache behind the tears. This mind-bending possibility is at the heart of what people call the philosophical zombie puzzle. At first glance, it seems too strange to be true. After all, how can a being look so convincingly alive inside yet remain hollow? But once you start thinking about it, you realize how limited our tools are for proving someone else actually experiences sensations like pleasure or pain. The deeper you go, the more it shakes up your sense of what it means to be a conscious human being. In exploring this second major puzzle, we're going to walk through exactly why some philosophers believe these so-called zombies force us to rethink the difference between behavior on the outside and awareness on the inside. It's helpful to begin with a simple example. Suppose you stub your toe on the edge of a table, and you let out a yelp of pain. Everyone around can see you flinch, grab your foot, and maybe you mutter something like, "Ouch, that hurts." They assume you actually feel pain inside, some real, subjective experience of throbbing discomfort. But imagine a creature that looks exactly like you, says ouch, rubs its toe, and appears upset, yet it feels nothing at all. The pain is just an automatic script or behavior. It's not merely pretending in the sense of lying, it's more that it has no internal sense of what pain is. Everything it does is outward and mechanical, but to any observer, it's identical to a normal human reaction. That creature is what we call a philosophical zombie, outwardly a perfect replica of human responses, inwardly a complete blank. People wonder what the point is of hypothesizing such a creature if, as far as the outside world can tell, it's identical to a normal person. The point is this: it highlights the idea that, no matter how closely you watch someone's behaviors or how much they claim to feel something, you can never be 100% certain that there's an inner light or consciousness behind those behaviors. This might sound silly or extremely paranoid. After all, we usually trust that if someone says, "I'm happy," they really feel happiness. Yet philosophers argue that there's no logical contradiction in imagining a being that acts out all the correct expressions with no actual joy behind them. That scenario challenges a big question about how we prove the presence of consciousness in others. One reason this puzzle upsets our usual thinking is that we tend to figure if a person looks sad, tears up, or says "I'm hurting," that is enough to confirm they have an emotional life. We rely on outward signs to guess at what's happening inside. But the philosophical zombie scenario says these outward signs could, in principle, exist on their own, disconnected from any real feeling. For everyday practical life, we don't walk around suspecting people are zombies, but in deeper philosophical debates about the mind, it's a huge reminder that what we see from outside might not match what's truly going on inside. If such zombies can be imagined, and it's not logically impossible, then maybe consciousness is not explained simply by external behavior or purely physical processes. This puzzle also directly pokes at certain scientific theories that say consciousness is just the sum of brain activity and chemical signals. If that's so, then any being with the same brain activity as a normal human should have consciousness. But if a zombie has the same outward behavior and possibly the same physical organization but no inner sense, that implies there may be something else required for consciousness beyond just matter and motion. Some people defend a view called behaviorism or certain variants of it, suggesting that all that matters for mental states is how an entity behaves. For them, if something consistently acts like it's in pain, we can say it's in pain. But the philosophical zombie argument tries to drive a wedge. What if it's only acting like it's in pain yet truly experiences nothing? If that scenario is even thinkable, some argue, it means consciousness is not fully captured by outward behavior. Another version of the story challenges a viewpoint known as physicalism, which says that if you replicate all the physical structures, like brain cells, neural pathways, you also replicate consciousness. Yet if a zombie can have identical brain structures but still no actual feelings, it might show that physical duplication does not guarantee a subjective inner world. Before diving deeper, it's helpful to draw a simple picture in your mind. Envision two people side by side, person A and person Z. Person A is a normal human. If they feel upset, their face changes, maybe tears appear, their voice trembles, and inside they genuinely have a sense of sadness. Person Z acts exactly the same. If you measure their muscle movements, their facial expressions, their words, everything matches person A's behavior. They might say, "I feel so sad," or "that movie made me cry," and tears might flow. But on the inside, there is total emptiness, no sadness is actually felt. The mind, so to speak, is a blank. They are more like a robot or machine that is perfectly programmed to exhibit sadness behavior whenever it is triggered. Try as you might, you can't tell the difference from the outside. That's the essence of the philosophical zombie puzzle, an outwardly perfect imitation, inwardly nothing. If you're wondering if such a zombie could exist in real life, the simplest answer might be that nobody claims actual zombies roam the streets. It's more of a hypothetical scenario, something used to test our ideas about consciousness. Yet it's potent because it suggests that, in principle, you cannot absolutely prove that any other person has conscious experience. You can guess it, you can trust your empathy or rely on the fact that they talk about feelings much like you do. But short of some magical mind-reading device, there's no guaranteed method to step inside their subjective world. This can lead to a sense of isolation. Each of us only directly knows our own consciousness. We see evidence that others have it, but we can't see from within them. The possibility of zombies heightens that sense. Could it be that we're the only real mind, surrounded by perfect actors? Of course, almost no one goes around truly suspecting their family or friends are philosophical zombies. It's usually recognized as a purely hypothetical puzzle. But the puzzle's impact is felt strongly in discussions about the nature of consciousness, especially arguments about whether the physical brain alone explains awareness, or if there's something extra that physical descriptions don't capture. Some philosophers, called property dualists, say that even if you replicate all the physical stuff, you might still not replicate the private, subjective fields, often called qualia, the quality of experience. They claim zombies show that qualia is not strictly determined by the physical side. Meanwhile, philosophers who are strict physicalists respond that maybe the zombie scenario is actually impossible. They say you can imagine it if you try, but in reality, if you have the same physical structures in the brain, you must end up with the same feelings. So the zombie puzzle becomes a battleground over whether or not it can exist in any logically possible universe. But let's step back into simpler, everyday terms. The question, could someone behave just like me, yet have no inner experience, touches our natural assumption that to act sad, you have to feel sad. That assumption is how we bond with others. We see tears and think, they must be hurting. We see a smile and assume they must be happy. The zombie puzzle suggests a deeper possibility that the outward display could exist without the internal feeling. If that's so, how can we ever know for sure that any living, talking being is not a zombie? That's part of why it's unsettling. It highlights how limited our knowledge about other minds can be. Sure, you might guess that your friend is conscious, but that guess is based on trusting that they are made of the same stuff you are, and they act similarly to how you do when you have experiences. If you reflect on that, it's not absolute proof, just a strong assumption. Some folks try to approach it from a more emotional perspective. I can't imagine that person not having feelings, because I see so much genuine expression in them. But of course, if you think the philosophical zombie can mimic genuine expression perfectly, that emotional argument won't hold. The puzzle is specifically that the acting is perfect, down to every twitch of a muscle or change in voice tone. From your viewpoint, it's precisely the same as if they truly felt it. So the only reason you wouldn't suspect them of being a zombie is that you find it strange or unlikely. But theoretically, you can't rule it out with absolute certainty. Another angle to consider is how this intersects with AI, artificial intelligence, discussions. Suppose we develop an AI so advanced that it talks, learns, cracks jokes, and claims to feel emotions. Will that AI be truly conscious inside, or is it basically a philosophical zombie running complex algorithms? The puzzle resonates here. Some people say consciousness arises whenever information is processed in the right way, so that AI would be conscious. Others say no, it might be a complicated set of responses without any real feelings. Philosophical zombies stand as a reminder that intelligence, the ability to do tasks, hold conversations, solve problems, might not automatically mean conscious experience, if that is indeed a separate phenomenon. So this idea isn't just abstract speculation, it touches real debates about how we will treat advanced robots or AI. Will we see them as having rights if they act like us and claim to feel? Or will we remain skeptical they have that inner spark? To make sense of it in simpler everyday terms, consider a puppet show. You see puppets that move, speak with distinct voices, and express emotions, all controlled by the puppeteer. The puppet can say "I'm sad," and it might slump its shoulders. But we know it's not sad, it's just performing. A philosophical zombie is like a puppet, except there is no visible puppeteer pulling the strings, and it's so advanced that you can't even see that it's a puppet. Instead, it has all the physical motions and maybe even a brain that's structured similarly to ours, just without the conscious feeling. Now, if it's physically structured exactly like us, some philosophers say consciousness must follow, so the zombie scenario can't happen in the real world. But the puzzle says, imagine a world where that's not so, where you can copy all the physical stuff but skip the inner experience. That possibility, if it's not contradictory, implies consciousness is something extra, something not automatically guaranteed by having a certain arrangement of neurons or a certain pattern of behavior. You might ask, why do I care if it's only hypothetical? Well, it matters because it forces us to pinpoint what we believe about the connection between physical matter, like the brain's neurons, and the subjective feeling of being alive. If it's possible to have the structure and function without the feeling, then consciousness might be something beyond the purely physical structure. If it's impossible, that means any perfect physical copy must also have consciousness, implying that consciousness is deeply tied to the material arrangement. The puzzle clarifies the dividing line in a simple, startling way. Without it, some arguments about consciousness might seem vague. With the zombie puzzle, we see just how far we can push the difference between looking conscious and being conscious. Now, everyday folks might find it interesting because it also touches on empathy. If the world had zombies, you might empathize with them for no reason, or you might fail to empathize with them if you realized they feel nothing. The question is, does moral consideration require the other being to have an inner life, or is it enough that they behave like they do? Some might say it's the subjective experience that matters. Pain is important because it's felt. If a zombie does not actually feel pain, maybe it doesn't matter if you treat it well or badly. That can open a tricky moral door. If you suspect something or someone is a zombie, do you owe them kindness? But we don't want to go around accusing living people of being empty inside. This shows that the puzzle can raise ethical issues about how we define who deserves empathy. It might remind you of how we treat animals or how we might treat robots in the future. The essence of caring about others is usually the belief they can experience good or bad feelings. One might also connect philosophical zombies to illusions or acting in daily life. People can pretend to be happy, even if they are miserable inside, but that's still them having a real feeling they're hiding. A zombie, however, is not even hiding anything. It literally has nothing inside. So it's different from pretend or faked emotions, because those require a mind that is aware it's faking. The zombie puzzle says that you can have all the output of human emotion with no actual emotional input. It's a deeper idea than just hypocrisy or deceit. It's a total absence of feeling behind the show. That's more akin to a perfect machine that's been programmed with if X event occurs, produce Y expression or statement. The weird part is that in this puzzle, it can produce extremely complicated, lifelike if-then responses for any scenario, because physically it is set up to do so. For those who believe strongly in physical explanations of everything, philosophical zombies are sometimes seen as a trick. They'd say if you replicate a human's brain exactly, you automatically replicate the consciousness, because consciousness is a function of that arrangement. They argue that although you can imagine a zombie, it doesn't mean it is logically or physically possible. They might compare it to imagining a square circle, something you can mention in words, but that might actually be self-contradictory. If, in the real world, having a certain pattern of neurons automatically causes feeling, then a perfect copy can't be empty. But zombie supporters respond that they can conceive of the idea clearly, and conceivability suggests it's at least logically possible. This back and forth is part of what's known as the zombie argument in philosophy of mind. It's a major debate, not simply an odd fantasy, because it pinpoints a big question: is consciousness more than just a physical arrangement? To bring it closer to everyday reasoning, think about how you believe your best friend is conscious. Usually, you trust that because you see them react to jokes, show concern when you're upset, share personal stories and so forth. The zombie puzzle says you could duplicate every physical detail of your friend, their brain, body, everything, but strip away the subjective experience. Then your friend's double would respond identically, including the same jokes or tears, but not actually feel any of it. If that scenario is truly coherent, it reveals that consciousness is an extra piece on top of the physical stuff. If you can't imagine that scenario making sense, maybe it feels contradictory, then you might side with those who say the puzzle is describing an impossible situation. But even if you do see it as impossible, you have to clarify why. Is it because you think physical structure always leads to inner feelings? That stance has its own challenges. Another dimension is how we relate this to knowledge. Even if the zombie puzzle is hypothetical, it underscores how we don't directly see anyone else's consciousness. We rely on inferences, like they talk about their day, they appear to have pains and joys, they must have an internal mind. The puzzle peeks in and says, but what if they do all that with zero awareness? Our usual logic about other minds might not be as airtight as we assume. Most of us go on trusting that others feel as we do, because a world where nobody else truly feels is pretty lonely or terrifying. But the philosophical zombie puzzle shows that trust is, at least partly, an assumption. This can lead to a new appreciation for the fact that each mind is, in some sense, only directly known by itself. In daily conversation, you might joke about someone acting like a zombie if they seem emotionless. Of course, that's not quite the same as a genuine philosophical zombie, because that person might be numb or apathetic but still has some experiences, just less enthusiasm. A true philosophical zombie has no experiences at all, no conscious sensations. It's a far more extreme concept, almost like a perfectly advanced android that can pass all emotional tests but is hollow inside. The puzzle is that if they are physically identical, in every cell, every part of their brain, how can you say they lack the experiences? Or if they lack them, does that prove there's something intangible about consciousness that can't be explained by physical facts alone? Some philosophers propose that if zombies are logically possible, it shows physicalism. The belief that everything about the mind can be explained physically might be incomplete. Others counter that if physicalism is correct, zombies can't exist. The puzzle helps them test how strongly each side holds up. In many ways, it's a battlefield for theories of mind. The average person might find these debates too abstract, but they do connect to broader issues like how we treat animals, how we interpret AI, or how we handle discussions of subjective well-being in science. If subjective experiences are essential, it might mean purely behavioral or physical approaches to the mind miss something critical. Another reason people consider the zombie scenario is the question of how illusions or unconscious reflexes shape behavior. We already know that a lot of human actions can happen unconsciously, like driving a familiar route on autopilot while daydreaming about something else. In some sense, part of your body is acting like a zombie, responding to the road automatically. The difference is that you're still in there, daydreaming consciously about something else. So it's not a full philosophical zombie, but it does illustrate how complicated the link is between behavior and conscious control. Some psychologists note that many of our choices or emotional responses are shaped by subconscious processes, which might look suspiciously like a scripted set of rules. But we do have conscious awareness layered on top. The zombie puzzle wonders, what if that awareness never turned on? Now, if you think about it, the zombie puzzle pairs nicely with the idea that we might be in a simulation. In a simulated reality, if our advanced programmers wanted, they could code everyone else as a zombie except for you. They would appear fully conscious but have no real inner world. Or maybe you are the zombie. Or maybe everyone is? The possibilities multiply, which can be overwhelming, yet it's a big part of these surreal philosophical experiments. They keep reminding us that many of our everyday certainties could, in theory, be illusions. We normally handle that by ignoring it so we don't go insane with doubt. But from a purely logical standpoint, it's tough to disprove. These puzzles might not be facts, but they're not trivial to dismiss once you see how they are grounded in questions of how we define consciousness or rely on outward behavior. One everyday analogy might help. Think about a chat program that uses advanced AI to respond to your messages in a very human-like way. If it's good enough, you could end up having long conversations where it jokes, complains about being tired, or says it's excited about something. But we can guess it has no actual emotional states. It's just responding with patterns that match how people talk. If you met that AI in a robot body that moved and had facial expressions timed perfectly, you might be fooled into thinking it was truly feeling those things. A philosophical zombie is like that, but more extreme. Instead of just faking emotions with words, it physically does everything a person does, inch for inch, neuron for neuron, yet with no actual feeling. That's why the puzzle is so potent. If even advanced AI can trick us partway, a perfect copy of a human's behavior might trick us fully. Therefore, how do we know it's not all trickery from the inside? Some physicalist thinkers respond that if it truly matches every neuron, it might not be a trick at all. Maybe that's just what consciousness is. The zombie argument tries to say, but can't you still imagine it lacking consciousness? If yes, we might conclude that the link between physical states and consciousness isn't guaranteed by logic alone. If no, we might say that imagining a zombie that is physically identical but lacks consciousness is actually a disguised contradiction. So the entire debate can revolve around what can be imagined or conceived. That might sound funny, but philosophers often rely on what they call conceivability arguments, since they deal with abstract issues that can't be tested in a lab. The ability to conceive of a zombie scenario is central to the argument that it might be logically possible. Opponents say it's a false sense of conceivability, or that you can talk about it but not truly visualize it properly. This leads to complicated back and forths in philosophy journals. From a more casual standpoint, you can see how this puzzle changes how we might talk about empathy or moral consideration. Many say consciousness, the actual capacity to experience pain and joy, is what grants a being moral status. If a being can't feel anything, then it's not wrong to treat it as a mindless tool. For instance, we don't worry about hurting a rock's feelings, because we believe it lacks any capacity for feeling. If a philosophical zombie looks human but lacks feelings, then maybe in a moral sense, it's like a rock in terms of subjective well-being, even though it fools us by outward behavior. This is an uncomfortable stance, but it highlights how assumptions about consciousness underlie a lot of ethical thinking. Another place it might matter is in advanced AI or robotics. If someday a robot begs us not to turn it off, is it truly experiencing fear, or is it zombie-like, simply going through the motions? Our answers might decide how we treat that being. So, the zombie puzzle, while theoretical, has very real potential implications once technology crosses certain thresholds. One interesting angle is whether you could be a philosophical zombie yourself and not know it. After all, you might think you feel things, but maybe all your talk of feelings is just part of the script. This becomes paradoxical, because the idea of not truly feeling but only thinking you feel might not make sense if you have no real thoughts at all. Typically, the puzzle states that a zombie has no conscious reflection either, so it doesn't think it feels, it just says it does or acts as though it does. That might mean a self-proclaimed zombie can't exist, because if you truly recognized you had no feelings, that recognition might be a feeling or at least a conscious awareness. So it's likely the scenario is that the zombie just goes through the motions with zero awareness. That means it can't step outside and say, "I'm a zombie." So you might relax knowing you can't secretly be a zombie who is faking everything, because if you reflect on your own experiences at all, that's already more than a zombie could do. The puzzle is more about whether other beings could be that, not yourself. You know you have experiences because you directly feel them. The real mystery is about everyone else. Do they have a private world like you do, or are they zombie-coded to pretend? There's also a history to how this puzzle developed, often credited in modern form to philosophers wanting to show that no matter how we specify physical processes, we can imagine duplicating them minus consciousness. This is used as an argument that consciousness is a unique property that physical descriptions can't fully capture. Some find it compelling, some do not. Regardless, it has become one of the classic examples taught in philosophy of mind courses to highlight the other mind's problem and the gap between external evidence and internal awareness. It's worth noting that, in everyday life, no one truly suspects they are surrounded by zombies. We observe consistent emotional depth in people, love, and heartbreak, creativity, complex personal growth. All these things strongly suggest an inner dimension. The puzzle is less about suspecting real zombies exist and more about the possibility. If the possibility cannot be logically ruled out, it means consciousness might be somewhat intangible or beyond direct observation. That intangible nature is exactly why many say consciousness is the hard problem, separate from things like breathing or digestion, which are obviously physical processes we can track. Consciousness has that subjective, first-person viewpoint that can't be pinned down by third-person observation alone. The zombie puzzle is a crisp illustration of that gap. Moreover, philosophical zombies might come in degrees. Maybe you have partial zombies that can exhibit some feelings but not others. The puzzle typically deals with the extreme case, zero consciousness. But you can imagine lesser forms of partial feeling. People talk about philosophical vampires, or zombie-like states, though that's more comedic than formal. It demonstrates that once you allow the door to open to the idea that outward behavior might not match inward states, you can walk through a bunch of variations. The pure zombie scenario is the simplest, a fully exact copy physically but with no inner life. Another question is how illusions or illusions of illusions might factor in. If a zombie says I had a wonderful dream last night, but can't have dreams at all, then it's just mouthing lines. The entire puzzle is that everything it claims is hollow. But if you see no difference in its actions, it's effectively a stand-in for a real human. That can spook people because it suggests that in principle, if you had a big enough lab or advanced technology, you could build a fake person who goes around living a normal life, fooling everyone, and it would not be a moral tragedy for that being, since it's not truly feeling anything. But it might be a moral issue for the real humans deceived by it. Or if we have laws that protect conscious beings from harm, how do we classify the zombie? This might remind you of certain science fiction plots where androids pass as humans. Philosophical zombies are an older concept but address the same question from a purely philosophical angle. If behavior alone does not guarantee consciousness, then no matter how advanced an android is, you can't be sure it's conscious, unless you assume that physical or computational complexity automatically yields consciousness. Despite all this, if you asked a random person on the street whether zombies like that exist, they'd likely laugh it off. It feels so against our normal experience. Everyone we talk to, we assume, has some inner sense. The puzzle's entire trick is that there is no easy logical contradiction in imagining someone who behaves the same but lacks that sense. You can see how it's a special kind of scenario, used mostly as a thought experiment, not an everyday concern. But it highlights the deeper truths about how we rely on trust or shared humanity rather than absolute proof when we say, yes, my friend really has feelings and is not a mindless husk. In a way, that trust is a huge unspoken agreement that holds society together. Some might ask whether real-life examples like certain severe disorders or conditions could parallel the zombie notion. For example, some conditions might reduce emotional response or empathy, but that's not quite the same, because they still have some inner experience. True philosophical zombies have no glimmer of consciousness at all, zero. It's more extreme than any known disorder or condition. So while there might be superficial similarities, the puzzle is very all or nothing. Another question is if any animals we see might be zombies. Usually, we presume animals have some consciousness, though perhaps simpler. But the puzzle states it's possible for any creature with a certain physical form to either have or lack an inner life. Philosophically, you could have a zombie dog or a zombie parrot. But again, there's no direct sign that such a creature exists, just the claim that we can't fully rule out that possibility from how it acts. Some find comfort in the idea that if we tried to build a zombie with exactly the same brain structure as a normal person, maybe that structure automatically fosters consciousness. They say it's impossible to copy the outward actions without also copying the experiences. That's called the no-zombie viewpoint. Maybe the puzzle is just a trick of imagining something that can't really happen. People who hold that belief see the puzzle as revealing how we might mistakenly think about the mind. They argue that if you have identical physical organization, you must get the same mental states. The zombie puzzle is just a mental illusion that leads you to believe you can strip away the inner life. The debate, therefore, zeroes in on the question: can you truly imagine a functionally identical being without consciousness, or is that imagining incomplete? Philosophers call this the difference between metaphysical possibility, could it exist in any real sense, and logical possibility, can you describe it in words? People may describe it, but that doesn't guarantee it's coherent at a deep level. For those less involved in the philosophy, the puzzle still offers a huge reason to appreciate the mysteries of the mind. We often say, he's in pain, she's in pain, I can empathize, but we do so by projecting our own inner experiences onto others. The zombie scenario shows that projection might not guarantee it's actually there. Meanwhile, from your own first-person perspective, you know you have sensations. That's called the first-person certainty of your own consciousness. You cannot be mistaken about whether you feel something right now. But you can be mistaken about whether someone else does. Philosophical zombies highlight that gap so sharply that it can be a bit unsettling. Yet ironically, that might encourage us to treat others kindly, because we realize how fragile and private their experience is, if they indeed have it. Or it might make us wonder if some among us are empty shells, though that's not a practical suspicion, just a philosophical pose. One interesting link is to illusions or acting. Sometimes in daily life, we do fake an emotion to be polite or avoid conflict. But we still experience the choice to pretend. A zombie would not have that conscious choice, it just does what it's built to do. That difference might highlight how real humans have an inner dimension that decides or experiences. Another link is empathy as a skill. We guess that others have emotional states. The zombie puzzle basically says, yes, you guess that, but you can't prove it. This connects deeply with the problem of other minds, a famous puzzle in philosophy that wonders how we know if others have minds at all. Philosophical zombies are that problem on steroids, because they propose a scenario where the other being has all the right outward expressions but no mind. As with all these reality benders, the point might not be to conclude yes, zombies exist or no, they don't, but to show how easily we can unravel assumptions about consciousness or how we confirm it in others. It pairs neatly with other illusions about reality, letting us see that appearances, whether of a real physical environment or real emotions, might be misleading. It's also not about scaring you into doubting that your family or friends have an inner life. Instead, it pushes you to realize you rely on trust and empathy to connect with them, rather than absolute proof. That realization can either spark curiosity or cause a moment of existential reflection, wondering how we got comfortable with so much uncertainty. Typically, we simply are comfortable because we need to be. Life demands we treat each other as conscious beings, or society can't function. Some have used the zombie puzzle to criticize certain views in neuroscience that claim to explain consciousness purely by referencing brain activity and outwardly observable functions. If zombies can be physically the same yet not experience, that means something about consciousness goes beyond the physical. This beyond the physical stance is not necessarily religious or anything, it can be philosophical speculation that consciousness might not be fully reduced to brain circuits, or that we're missing some ingredient. Others say the puzzle has no real force because they deny the possibility. So there's an ongoing debate about whether zombies truly could exist in a logically consistent sense or if they're akin to square circles that you can talk about but can't actually draw. The puzzle remains a classic for students of mind to cut their teeth on. In simpler language, the puzzle is like saying, could I design a perfect android that does everything a human does but feels nothing? If you say sure, I can imagine it, you might be leaning toward the idea that consciousness is extra. If you say, no, that's impossible, if it does everything physically the same, it must feel, you're leaning toward a different stance. This is exactly the dividing line many philosophers argue about. At the everyday level, you might find comfort in the knowledge that real humans certainly appear to have genuine emotional worlds. They talk about heartbreak, delight, sorrow, worry, in ways that match what you know from your own life. The zombie puzzle does not claim you will meet someone who is literally a hollow shell. It just claims it's not logically impossible. That difference might keep you from losing sleep over it. Yet if you find the scenario's mere conceivability disturbing, you are getting the taste of how philosophical thought experiments can pry into the parts of reality you assumed were safe. It's a classic example of how an idea can be both a little scary and intellectually exciting. Some folks respond by flipping it around. Well, how do I know I'm not the zombie? But typically, if you have any sense of real pain or joy, you know you do. A full zombie would never even think, am I missing something? Because that's already a type of inner questioning. So if you genuinely sense your own feelings, you can't be a zombie. The question is always about others, or about whether it's physically possible in principle. So you can rest assured that, from your viewpoint, if you experience anything at all, you're not a philosophical zombie. That still leaves open how sure you can be about other creatures or other people, but most of us proceed with trust or empathy, figuring they are built similarly to ourselves, hence they must have feelings. An interesting offshoot is the notion that zombies might test how big the gap is between objective science and subjective experience. If objective science fully captured the mind, we might say, no, you can't have the same structure without the same experience. If subjective experience is partly outside the reach of objective science, maybe you can. It's one more step in the debate over how science approaches consciousness, which remains one of the biggest unsolved problems. Some scientists aim to identify the neural correlates of consciousness and claim once we find them, that's all. Others suspect no matter how many correlations we find, consciousness has a property that's more than just the correlation. Zombies help highlight the difference. The full correlation of brain state and behavior might exist without the feeling, if zombies are possible. In some ways, it's like a mirror. We typically rely on the outside signs of being alive in a feeling sense, but the zombie puzzle says that mirror can reflect all the physical details while leaving out the real phenomenon. This ties to how illusions can be perfect illusions for an observer, if they mimic the original closely enough. Just as a perfect simulation of the cosmos can fool inhabitants, a perfect human mimic can fool others about its emotional life. Interestingly, you might recall that we often do Turing tests for artificial intelligence, seeing if it can pass as a human in conversation. The philosophical zombie is like a Turing test champion for inner life, but it's a cheat. It doesn't actually have a mind, it just performs the outward behavior. A truly advanced AI might pass every outward test we have, but that alone might not guarantee it has real feelings, if indeed a gap can exist. It's quite a mind-bending scenario when we consider the future of AI. Now, how does this puzzle connect with the real world if we're pretty sure actual humans are not zombies? For many, it's a way to keep the door open to the idea that consciousness is mysterious, that we don't have a final handle on how it arises or how to measure it. It's also a caution that any purely external approach to describing a mind might miss the essential core. That caution can be relevant in psychology, medicine, or philosophy of technology. For instance, if you want to ensure an AI or a robot is truly feeling, you might have to consider more than just external performance. If your goal is to make a robot friend that actually has emotions, you need a better theory of how subjective states can exist, not just a script for emotional expressions. It also touches the question of how we bond with others. We generally assume other people are like us inside. The possibility of zombies says we rely on empathy and symmetry. They have a similar body and brain to me, so presumably they also have feelings. That assumption is not a proof, just a rational guess. The puzzle warns that in principle, a being might have the same outward shape and actions but lack the inner side. In daily life, of course, we don't suspect that, because it's a deeply unusual scenario, but it underscores how the sense of we're in this together depends on believing others share consciousness. Philosophically, that means your entire moral and social world is partly built on an unproven assumption, one that might be correct, but can't be absolutely proven through observation. Those who find the puzzle especially interesting might start connecting it to personal reflection about how we treat animals, or how we handle different levels of consciousness in various species. We might assume a dog or a cat has some simpler consciousness, but do we ever fully know? If the concept of a zombie is possible, maybe some living creatures are closer to that line than we realize. Though realistically, we see living animals respond in ways that strongly suggest real feelings. So again, we rely on outward clues plus a sense of shared biology to guess they have minds. But the puzzle remains a crack in that certainty. Some might push it even further. What if you saw an alien species with very different biology but apparently complex communication and emotional signs? Would you wonder if they truly feel or if they're just advanced puppets? Returning to the main track, the whole point is that philosophical zombies highlight how difficult it is to tie consciousness firmly to what we see. If a perfect replica of a human's actions could exist without the soul of experience, then consciousness is at least conceptually independent from those actions. That might or might not reflect how the real world works, but the puzzle shows it's not an easy question. The takeaway for most people is that consciousness is a phenomenon we perceive directly only in ourselves. We see others' behavior but do not see their inwardness. The zombie puzzle is just an imaginary scenario that removes that inwardness while preserving all else, prompting us to notice how huge the difference is between outward appearance and subjective reality. As we wrap up the subject, it's good to emphasize again that philosophers don't literally believe we are surrounded by actual zombies in our everyday environment. The scenario is a conceptual tool to test theories about mind and matter. Yet its potential to unsettle us is real. If you dwell on it too long, you might get a weird feeling that you can't confirm your friends, your parents, or your teachers truly have feelings. The puzzle's biggest success is making you realize you rely on trust and empathy rather than direct proof. That might even deepen your appreciation for the fragile miracle of consciousness, both in yourself and in those around you. It can make your next conversation feel a bit more precious, knowing that you assume, but can't fully prove, there's another glowing mind behind the words. It also acts as a stepping stone to the next puzzles we'll explore. We started with the idea that our entire universe might be a simulation, questioning if the environment is real or generated by advanced code. Now, with philosophical zombies, we question whether the people we encounter might be genuinely feeling or just outwardly performing. Each puzzle chips away at something we usually take for granted, the reality of the world, the authenticity of other minds, and so on. Next, we might challenge whether a fake yet perfect experience is better than the real, sometimes tough experiences of genuine life. These steps are designed to show how easily we can turn everyday assumptions on their head and remind ourselves that reality could be more fragile or layered than it seems. In practice, philosophical zombies are meant to help you think about how we define consciousness, how we might detect it, and why it matters that someone actually feels pain rather than just acts like it. Even if you finish these hours of exploration convinced that zombies can't exist in any real sense, the mental journey clarifies your reasons. Maybe you'll conclude, if someone has the exact same physical brain as me, they must have experiences, so zombies are impossible. Or if you see them as possible, you might think, okay, so that means consciousness can't be explained by physical states alone. In either case, you are engaging with the heart of one of the most nagging mysteries about the mind. Why does it feel like something to be alive, as opposed to merely functioning? So, let's let that question rest. Could there be beings who do everything humans do yet feel nothing? Does that scenario reveal a hidden gap in our scientific accounts of consciousness, or is it an illusion of thought that crumbles under closer inspection? The debate continues, but the puzzle remains an iconic tool for rattling our normal confidence about how we read the signs of emotion in others. It's the next step on our journey through reality-bending puzzles, a reminder that not only might our surroundings be questionable, but even the seemingly real emotions in the people around us might, in principle, be hollow. That line of thought, while unsettling, also fosters a deeper respect for how special genuine awareness might be. If being real on the inside is so important, we appreciate it more, just as we appreciate that a living friend is very different from a chatty puppet, no matter how convincing the puppet's words are. With that, we finish our deep look at philosophical zombies, a puzzle that treads into territory both fascinating and a bit eerie. Next, the focus will pivot to yet another challenge to everyday thinking. Would you step into a perfect, dreamlike machine that makes your life blissful, but ultimately fake? As we move there, keep in mind the lesson learned about outward actions versus inward experience. Perhaps it will guide you in weighing the difference between illusions and authenticity in the scenario that awaits. Part 3, The Experience Machine. Imagine a device that, once you step inside, can give you a wonderful experience you ever craved, tasting the finest meals, traveling to exotic worlds, winning every award you ever dreamed of, and sharing perfect moments with people who always understand you. In this machine, all the ugly parts of real life vanish. There is no heartbreak that lasts, no disappointment that crushes your spirit, and no fears left unresolved. In fact, every memory you form in this artificial paradise feels completely real. You would never guess it was all being fed to your senses by a system of wires and signals. The puzzle known as the experience machine asks if, given this option, you would decide to plug in and spend the rest of your days in ultimate bliss. It sounds tempting at first. Why suffer heartbreak or boredom if a machine can edit those out for you? Yet many people hesitate, sensing there is something important about facing real life, struggles and all, that might vanish if everything is guaranteed to be perfect. As we move into this third part of our journey through bizarre and reality-bending puzzles, we will explore precisely why someone might refuse an imaginary paradise and what that says about the value we place on authenticity. When philosophers first introduced this idea, they did it to test how much we care about real-life involvement as opposed to merely feeling happiness. After all, if our brains cannot tell the difference between a constructed joy and a natural joy, does it truly matter whether it is produced by a machine or by a genuine event? One immediate answer might be, no, if it feels good, that is enough. Think about small illusions in daily life, like losing yourself in a funny video or a comforting daydream, and how pleasant it is to forget your real worries for a moment. Now multiply that feeling to the extreme. In the experience machine, you would never get called back by the demands of daily obligations. You would be able to continue living your dream scenario for years, or even decades, without interruption. The machine's technology would ensure that every sense you have is fully satisfied. You could wake up in a magnificent house on a white sand beach, greet loving companions, eat the most delicious breakfast, and spend the day achieving feats that, in actual life, might be impossible. Whatever you can imagine that makes you happiest, accomplishing a dream job, being celebrated by everyone you admire, or just relaxing without a single worry, could be permanently yours. That might sound like the peak of human existence. Yet the puzzle pushes deeper. Would a life of perfect happiness, entirely generated by an artificial process, lose something essential? Many respond that real experiences matter. For instance, if you climb a mountain and struggle with every step, the view from the top feels earned, and that sense of accomplishment is uniquely tied to the difficulties you overcame. In a perfect simulation, you might experience the thrill of reaching the summit and hear the cheering of onlookers, but beneath the surface, you have not genuinely done the work. From the outside, maybe no one can tell the difference, but inside the machine, do you know? Actually, the device is described in a way that you do not remember the decision to enter it, so you would not suspect your triumphs are false. Nonetheless, many people argue that deep down, something about an achievement you did not struggle for is hollow. If you could ever discover the truth, you might feel cheated. But the trick here is that inside the machine, you cannot discover it. You believe everything is real. So does that emptiness even matter if you never sense it? That is precisely what sparks so much debate. Some suggest that the difference between dreamed experience and real experience remains crucial, even if you cannot tell them apart. Others say that if your mind is satisfied and you never realize the difference, there is no harm done. The purpose of the experience machine puzzle is to reveal that many of us have instincts against the idea of living a purely artificial existence, no matter how pleasant. We might say we want truth, or actual relationships, or the ability to help real people instead of program-generated characters. Critics counter that helping real people might also give you a sense of purpose or happiness, so if the machine can simulate that sense of helping, you get the same satisfaction. But if those people are not truly conscious, just lines of code or illusions, the accomplishment might not feel real. To some, the puzzle tests how strongly we value authenticity compared to subjective pleasure. Think about simpler examples. Suppose you have a friend who constantly boasts of winning all sorts of awards, but in reality, they never actually won them. They faked the pictures, the trophies, the stories. If you do not find out, you might admire them. But does their praise matter if the achievements are false? For many, once they discover the deception, the admiration collapses. Even if your friend looked happy the whole time, deep down they know they are living a lie. The experience machine puzzle suggests a scenario where you do not discover the lie, so you keep believing you truly accomplished great things. Does that remove the problem of it being unearned and staged? One side says yes, if you do not know, it is still fulfilling for you. The other side says there is an objective difference in what actually happens, so the illusions remain illusions, regardless of your awareness. Some people also worry that real relationships require independent minds. In a machine, you might laugh and cry with what you think are friends, but they are just parts of the program. They say and do what is needed to make you happiest, but they have no genuine feelings or free will, unless the machine is advanced enough to generate true consciousness in them, which adds another layer of complexity. If you personally believe that half the wonder of life is encountering genuine, unpredictable beings with their own desires, then a place where everyone is shaped to please you might seem shallow. On the other hand, if your main purpose is to feel good and share supportive companionship, maybe you do not mind that these people are program-based, as long as every sign of caring and personality is convincing. Again, it boils down to whether realness matters if the illusions are perfect. What if the machine ensures that some challenges remain, so you do not get bored, like a custom fake reality that has ups and downs to keep it interesting, yet never gets truly horrible? You might believe you are taking risks, facing heartbreak, or dealing with setbacks, but in truth, you are shielded from any lasting misery. You might have just enough struggle to appreciate the joys, but never so much that it breaks you. For some, that is an ideal compromise. You get the sense of a real, adventurous life without the possibility of total tragedy. Yet others argue that real risk, real possibility of failure or genuine heartbreak, is part of what makes achievements and relationships significant. If you always know that the machine will not let you endure serious suffering, then the risks are illusions. It is like riding a roller coaster that feels dangerous but has zero chance of going off the rails. The thrill might be fun, but is it the same as truly risking something? Many people reference how this puzzle highlights a difference between pleasure and meaning. Pleasure might be a feeling you can replicate in a perfect simulation, but some say meaning comes from engaging with reality in a genuine way, helping actual people, tackling actual problems, contributing to things that exist beyond your subjective feelings. The machine, in giving you guaranteed happiness, might block you from that sense of objective involvement. Yet others respond that what we call objective involvement is ultimately just our perceptions anyway, so if the machine can fool you so well, it should be enough. This ties back to that question about illusions and whether they can be as fulfilling as reality, especially if you never sense they are fake. Perhaps the simplest argument for refusing the machine is the idea that we want something more than just feeling good. We want real connections with others who have their own perspectives, real unpredictability that challenges us, and real moral weight to our actions. A purely engineered paradise could remove that friction that helps us grow and discover. At the same time, one could ask, are we idolizing pain and stress unnecessarily? If the machine can replicate growth experiences artificially, maybe we do not lose out. Or if we truly do not know, how can we say we are losing anything? Another interesting angle is that some folks compare the experience machine to how we might already choose smaller illusions in daily life. For example, we play video games where we become heroes saving kingdoms, and for a short time, it feels real enough to stir our emotions. We watch movies that make us cry or cheer, even though we know they are fictional stories. That is not the same as hooking up forever and thinking it is all real, but it shows we already enjoy illusions. The puzzle's difference is that it removes the exit door and says you cannot tell it is fiction. Once inside, your entire existence runs in this false environment. If small illusions can be pleasurable for a limited time, does that scale up to eternal illusions being best? Or do we enjoy illusions partly because we know they are illusions we can step away from, returning to real life? Maybe that knowledge is crucial. It can be helpful to think of an example. Maybe you dream of being a famous artist who travels the world. In the experience machine, you achieve this effortlessly. Each day, you paint marvelous works, attend glamorous art shows, and crowds adore you. You feel creative fulfillment, the pride of recognition, and the satisfaction of success. But if it is all code, you never truly paint anything that stands in a real physical gallery, and the fans are just clever scripts. A big question is whether that difference in outcome matters if you do not realize it. Some say the difference is huge, because in the real world, your art might affect real people with their own genuine feelings. In the machine, no actual person outside your mind is touched. If relationships and impacts on others are a big part of why we value certain achievements, then the simulation lacks that external dimension, no matter how real it appears from within. One might also consider how the puzzle compares to the possibility of living in a simulation, the first puzzle. They are related but not the same. Living in a simulation might mean the environment is artificial, but you can still face genuine unpredictability from other minds or cosmic events, unless it is also rigged to give you endless joy. The experience machine is specifically built to deliver maximum happiness or any scenario you desire, removing the normal pains of real existence. It is a more direct confrontation with the difference between real ups and downs versus guaranteed comfort. Some thinkers say if you are in a broader simulation, it could still contain real challenges and even real conscious beings. If you are in the experience machine, though, the design is all about giving you the best illusions. So it ups the stakes on how fake everything could feel. People often credit the experience machine puzzle with revealing that we place a higher value on authenticity or genuine contact with reality than on mere pleasant feelings. Many who discuss it say they would not plug in because they do not want to lose the realness of living in the actual world. On the other hand, some people confess that if it truly felt as real as daily life, they might yield to the temptation of constant happiness. Another aspect is that the puzzle generally says you do not remember the decision to plug in, so you would not be troubled by guilt or awareness of fakeness once inside. But from the vantage point outside, you might worry that your future self will live in a bubble, ignoring actual family, friends, or global problems. Another subtlety is whether the machine can also replicate challenges just enough to make them interesting. If everything is too perfect, you risk boredom. A well-designed system might let you fail sometimes, experience heartbreak, then bounce back stronger, all to create a perfect storyline. But you would still never truly fail in a permanent sense. The sorrow might last just the right amount of time to help you appreciate your next triumph. So it becomes more like a carefully written novel for your life, guaranteed to have a happy arc. Does that version of events fix the puzzle's worries? Some might say it hides them better, but the underlying question remains, do you want a carefully scripted path if it's not truly free or connected to a shared reality? It also touches the difference between wanting to feel brave or actually being brave. In real life, bravery involves facing genuine risks. In the machine, the risk could be secretly rigged so you never face irreversible harm. Are you truly courageous if you save people in a disaster scenario that the machine ensures cannot genuinely go wrong? Some will say no, that the essence of bravery is dealing with the uncertain possibility of real failure or loss. If that uncertainty is artificially limited by the machine, then your feeling of bravery might be a pleasant but empty imitation. Still, from a purely subjective standpoint, it might feel just as vivid. So does that falseness matter if you never discover it? That question returns us to the idea that illusions might be just as good if they are convincing, or that illusions fail to provide certain intangible values we crave. The puzzle shows how important that intangible difference can be for many people. We can also question whether we are perhaps already in smaller versions of such experiences. Some say society tries to shield us from certain harsh truths, or we hide in our own personal bubbles of positivity, ignoring the struggles of the wider world. But that is not exactly the same as the experience machine, which is absolute control over your sensory reality. Another angle is that some might believe life already is random or partly illusory, and that, if offered a chance to have guaranteed bliss, why not? There can be a philosophical or spiritual viewpoint that says real life is full of illusions anyway, so a carefully engineered good illusion might be no worse. Yet many still find themselves saying, I'd rather have the genuine article, illusions and all, than a purely faked scenario. It often shows that we believe in something about the objective nature of experiences that matters deeply, even if we cannot always articulate why. The puzzle also provides an important mirror for your personal ambitions. If your main drive is to feel good, maybe you would go for it. If you have deeper goals like seeking truth, building genuine bonds, or testing your limits in uncertain conditions, you might reject it. Robert Nozick, the philosopher who famously presented the experience machine argument, intended to show that most people care about something beyond happiness alone. We care about authenticity or truly doing certain things. He believed that if we only cared about feeling good, we would jump into the machine without a second thought, but many of us recoil from that choice, indicating that real engagement with the world is part of our value system. This is a key insight for moral philosophy, telling us that pure pleasure is not the only measure of a life's worth. Yet the puzzle is not a definitive proof. Some folks indeed say, sure, I'd plug in, as long as I'm convinced it's real. I have no problem living in a dream that is guaranteed to be wonderful. They see no shame in maximizing personal joy and ignoring the distinction between real events and illusions, since illusions that feel real are effectively real to them. If you are on the fence, you might try a simpler mental test. Imagine you can plug into a machine for a day. For that day, you have the best experiences possible. But then you are taken out and face the real world again. Would that day of bliss be worth it, knowing it was artificially constructed? Or would you feel disappointed afterward, realizing none of it truly happened? If even one day like that seems hollow once you are back, imagine a lifetime. But then again, if you never leave the machine, you never learn it was hollow, so that disappointment never arrives. So you see how the puzzle twists assumptions. Part of what might make illusions worthless is discovering they are illusions, but if you never discover it, do you lose anything? Some say yes, you lose the actual connection to the real world. Others say you do not lose anything that matters to you, since you remain blissfully in the dark. Some critics retort that even if the illusions remain hidden, the meaning is absent because meaning relies on something beyond personal feeling, like genuine accomplishments affecting a genuine reality. That approach ties back to the viewpoint that there is more to life than private mental states. For instance, working hard to cure a disease in real life affects countless real lives, which is meaningful in a way that a simulated cure might not be. You might have the same proud feeling in the machine, but it is about an event that is not truly altering a living world. That difference matters to many people, though the puzzle remains open-ended because others see no practical difference from the inside perspective. Beyond that, the puzzle highlights how illusions sometimes are fine for short-term entertainment, but building your entire existence on them might feel wrong. Yet it also tests how we define wrong. Is it morally wrong, or does it simply conflict with what you personally value? Some might argue that if your only goal is to maximize your internal sense of pleasure or satisfaction, the machine is the best choice. But if you include in your definition of a valuable life the realness of your achievements and relationships, then the machine cannot grant you that, at least not truly. This is why many thinkers say the puzzle reveals that we crave authenticity, not just good feelings, demonstrating that our concept of a fulfilling life goes beyond moment-to-moment pleasure. So it is a big blow to theories that claim pleasure is all that matters for human well-being. Of course, the puzzle can be adapted. Some might ask, what if the machine also includes the possibility of heartbreak or failure so it stays authentic? Then it starts to become almost a normal simulation scenario, not a guaranteed paradise. If heartbreak or failure is controlled just enough to make the joys sweeter, we run into a scenario that might be suspiciously close to normal life anyway, except that you remain in a loop of illusions. Maybe the machine is specifically designed so that every heartbreak leads to a deeper reward, guaranteeing a net perfect happiness across a lifetime. The question still stands, do you lose something about genuine unpredictability? Often, the answer is yes, that real unpredictability has a role in making experiences meaningful. The puzzle remains relevant because it shows how far we can go in removing unpredictability or negativity and still see a life that seems nice on the surface, but might lack a core authenticity if it is all staged. One might also reflect on how this puzzle ties into real-life technologies or escapism. People spend hours in social media worlds or virtual spaces, sometimes preferring them to real social interactions. We do not have a total experience machine yet, but the direction of technology moves us inch by inch toward more immersive experiences. If at some point, VR becomes so advanced that you can choose to live in it full-time with no memory of the outside world, we edge closer to the scenario. The puzzle's question becomes very practical: would you do it? Philosophers and ethicists might warn that we risk losing the grit of life, but others might say it is a personal choice. If it brings contentment, why not? Stepping back, the main reason the experience machine puzzle matters in this larger documentary is how it challenges one more everyday assumption. We usually think that feeling happy is a key goal, but here we see that many of us would reject guaranteed happiness if it is disconnected from real achievements and relationships. That suggests our values do not boil down to just make me feel good, but include let me do things that genuinely matter. It also pairs well with the earlier puzzle about a simulated universe, but with a twist. In the simulation puzzle, the environment itself might be artificial, yet still full of challenges. In the experience machine, the environment is designed specifically to maximize your joy. The difference helps show how illusions can be either a background condition, like a hidden simulation, or a direct aim, like a happiness machine. The second approach is far more in your face about the question, is a perfect but fake life better or worse than a sometimes harsh but real one? In the end, the puzzle does not demand you choose one side. It invites you to reflect on what is most important in your own sense of living well. Is it authentic ties to an unpredictable world, or unshakable bliss, even if staged? Some find it helpful to think of an example. Imagine telling your best friend about an accomplishment you faked, watching them beam with pride or congratulate you. You might feel a momentary boost, but if you know it's all a sham, do you really feel satisfied? The experience machine puzzle is the ultimate version, removing even that nagging knowledge because you do not recall choosing to plug in. So you never sense the sham. For many, that's still not enough to offset the idea that there is a big difference between illusions of accomplishments and real ones. Others who put subjective experience front and center might say illusions are just as good, as long as they produce the same mental states. The debate thus circles back to how we weigh internal feeling versus external reality. A further note is how this puzzle interacts with moral questions about helping others. If the machine is designed for you, presumably it includes illusions of you helping people. But those people might be purely virtual. If you value actual empathy or improving actual lives, that cannot happen in the machine. Yet if your moral satisfaction comes from believing you are helping, you still get that feeling. Some respond that genuine morality should address the real needs of real beings, so illusions do not count. But again, that depends on whether you see moral behavior as about the outcome in the real world or about the personal sense of doing good. This puzzle thus exposes how many of our judgments hinge on the existence of a truly shared reality we affect, rather than illusions. It might push you to see that part of the meaning in your actions is how they connect to something beyond your mental states. As with the earlier puzzles, it is interesting that we do not typically spend everyday life worrying that we might be missing out on a perfect fantasy. Yet the experience machine challenge reminds us that we actively choose to face a world that can be painful or uncertain instead of seeking total safety or a never-ending dream. Philosophers who mention this puzzle often say that most people's gut reaction is "I wouldn't plug in." The puzzle's lesson is that we care about more than just feeling good. Others, though a smaller number, say, if it's truly indistinguishable, sign me up. People who say that might be focusing on personal happiness above all else, or they see no difference between genuine struggles and illusions of struggles if the illusions feel real. Their stance might seem cold or extreme to those who place authenticity on a pedestal, but it's a valid viewpoint within the puzzle's framework. This puzzle can also lead to reflection on memories. If you spent decades in the machine, you would form countless memories of triumphs, relationships, travels, etc. None of them would be real. But you believe they are? Some philosophers argue that memories of fake events remain fake, so the life is empty. Others say that since you have the same recollection of them, from your perspective, they shape you just as much as actual events would. There is a link here to the simulation puzzle, where you might have a lifetime of experiences in a simulated reality that you do not realize is artificial. The experience machine, though, is specifically aimed at giving you an ideal life, so the joy is even more guaranteed. Some see it as a sharper test. It removes the neutrality or unpredictability of the simulation, ensuring maximum positivity. That difference is what makes it so direct in asking whether illusions, if pleasant enough, can substitute for actual achievements. It's also interesting to consider partial versions of this puzzle in real life. Many people use escapism, reading books, watching movies, playing VR games, to immerse themselves in a fantasy world for a few hours. We do not, however, dedicate our entire existence to it, because we sense that eventually we need to come back to the real world, deal with real responsibilities, and maintain genuine ties. The experience machine puzzle says, what if you never came back? If you think short-term immersion is harmless or even fun, does that scale up to indefinite immersion being the best option? For most, the answer is no, but that begs the question of why. Possibly it's because we know illusions can't carry the full weight of genuine life. Or maybe we simply fear regret if we discovered the truth. But in the puzzle's scenario, you never discover the truth. So then, what is the reason to say no? This highlights something about how we sense an intrinsic worth in real experiences. Even if illusions can be identical in feeling, we sense a difference in kind. That difference might be intangible, Some call it authentic connection, others call it objective reality. The puzzle reveals that intangible difference is crucial to many people's sense of what a fulfilling life entails. Another outcome is that we appreciate the variety of experiences real life throws at us, including the times of struggle or pain that shape our character. A pure dream might skip those or only simulate them gently, robbing them of true risk or cost. Many see that cost as exactly what makes the reward valuable. Indeed, some argue that triumph without any chance of failure is shallow. So the puzzle forces you to examine how significant that chance or difficulty is to your sense of accomplishment. As a final reflection on this puzzle, it does not necessarily show that hooking into the experience machine is wrong or foolish, but it does highlight that we tend to care about more than just being happy. We have an inbuilt desire for reality, genuine agency, and real-world impact. That explains why so many react by rejecting the machine, preferring the sometimes messy authenticity of normal life. Others believe that if illusions fool us perfectly, that is all we need. Ultimately, it is a personal stance, yet the puzzle's beauty is how it draws out these deeper values. The question is not just a yes/no choice, but a mirror that shows you which aspects of life, like unpredictability, moral growth, or meaningful connection, really matter to you. His approach to illusions is quite distinct from the philosophical zombie scenario, where other people might lack consciousness, or the simulation hypothesis, where our entire cosmos might be artificial. The experience machine is about whether you personally would trade real existence for a fully engineered set of experiences that provide endless delight. That difference means it centers on your preference for authenticity over maximum comfort. Many see that moral or existential dimension as the puzzle's heart. In contrast, the simulation question is more about whether you can detect a hidden code or whether it changes anything if you are in a fake universe. The philosophical zombie puzzle looks at how you know others have real feelings. Here, it's about whether you'd surrender reality if given the option to be perfectly content. In that sense, it's more direct, asking how far you'd go if illusions could satisfy every urge. In daily life, you might think about how this puzzle echoes smaller dilemmas. Do you prefer a comfortable lie that spares your feelings or the harsh truth that might help you grow or connect more deeply with real situations? On a large scale, the experience machine is the ultimate comfortable lie, a permanent fantasy of success, friendship, and love. Yet many of us sense that without the real friction of existence, it all might ring hollow. That is precisely why this puzzle is so powerful. It hits home that there is something in us that wants real engagement, genuine unpredictability, and tangible impact on the outside world, even if it sometimes hurts. It suggests that is part of what being human is about, not just feeling good inside a bubble. If you find yourself leaning toward plugging in, perhaps you place a higher value on personal mental states and see no point in wrestling with a reality that can be painful. That is a consistent viewpoint too, although a minority stance when people are asked in normal circumstances. It might show that you see illusions as perfectly valid if they accomplish the same emotional effects. Or you might find yourself torn, thinking you want some of life's real challenges, but maybe a toned-down version. That reveals how flexible our moral and psychological intuitions can be. Either way, thinking it through helps clarify what truly draws us to remain in real life. Sometimes, the daily grind, the risk of failure, and the potential for heartbreak are the price we pay for authenticity, creativity, and deeper relationships that revolve around independent minds, not code. Ultimately, the experience machine puzzle does not solve these questions for you, it just poses them in a sharp, unavoidable way. It's a perfect next step in our overall series of reality-bending challenges. First, we considered that the universe might be a simulation. Then, we looked at the idea that other people might be zombies without real feelings. Now we wonder if a perfect but synthetic life is preferable to a real but sometimes painful one. All these puzzles poke at the tension between illusions that feel real and the actual underlying reality that might be messy. By seeing how we respond to the prospect of living in a blissful but invented dream, we learn something about ourselves, how much we value honest connections, the freedom to face genuine challenges, and the sense that our experiences are more than just carefully choreographed illusions. Many come away feeling that real life, with all its unpredictability and effort, has a depth no machine could replicate. But the puzzle remains: if you never knew it was fake, are you truly missing out, or is that depth only relevant if you are aware of it? The discussion continues, keeping the experience machine puzzle at the center of philosophical debates about happiness, authenticity, and the meaning of a life well lived. Part 4, Boltzmann Brain. Picture a universe so vast and long-lasting that nearly anything you can imagine might happen by sheer random chance, given enough time. Now think about one of the strangest outcomes of all: a single, fully formed brain popping into existence for just a moment, complete with a lifetime's worth of memories and a vivid sense of being someone who has lived through years of experiences. This lonely brain, often called a Boltzmann brain, would suddenly appear in the cosmic emptiness, convinced it has had a rich life on a planet full of friends and family, even though none of that ever happened. Then, perhaps just as quickly, it could dissolve back into the randomness from which it emerged. The idea is almost funny the first time you hear it, like a bizarre joke science might play on itself. But at its core, it's a serious puzzle that challenges how confident we are about the reality of our past and the stability of what we call the world. By diving into this notion, we keep pushing on the hidden corners of experience, those corners where our usual beliefs about memory and reality can start to crack in surprising ways. Before we dig into the core problem, it helps to know where the term Boltzmann brain comes from. It's linked to a famous physicist named Ludwig Boltzmann, who studied how particles move in gases and how systems can randomly fluctuate. The puzzle suggests that in a truly enormous universe with enough random fluctuations, you could get a 1 in a gigantic number chance event where matter temporarily arranges itself into something extremely complex, like a functioning brain that thinks it has lived a long life. Even though the odds of this happening at any given moment seem impossibly small, some argue that if the universe is either infinite in size or endures for an unimaginably long time, the improbable might become inevitable somewhere, sometime. Suddenly, a brain appears out of scattered atoms, fully loaded with a false set of memories about a planet, friends, family, and a personal history that never actually unfolded. This poor brain might have the sensation of having just woken up, thinking it's a person named Alex or Kim or anything else, remembering going to school or celebrating birthdays, yet it truly existed for only a blink in the cosmic timeline, drifting in emptiness before falling apart. This sounds so outlandish that many people's first response is to laugh or dismiss it as pure fantasy. But the puzzle gains strength from the fact that mathematics does allow for odd fluctuations in very large systems, albeit with staggeringly tiny probabilities. The question then becomes, if random cosmic events can spontaneously create something as elaborate as a single brain, complete with illusions of a lifelong past, how do we know that we aren't exactly one of those flukes? Could it be that everything we think we remember is just a trick of neural firings in a spontaneously formed brain? If so, then our surroundings, from the chair you're sitting in to the sky overhead, might not exist at all. You, and only you, for that fleeting instant, believe in a world that never was. It's like an extreme version of the old joke, what if the universe was created 5 minutes ago with all our memories in place? Except driven by random cosmic events rather than a creator's whim. Now, the likelihood of such a momentary brain popping into existence in any one location or time is beyond tiny, so small that words like astronomical do not even begin to measure it. But some cosmological models suggest that, given infinite time or space, even the tiniest odds can happen eventually and might even happen infinitely many times. That leads to a weird conclusion: if our universe is truly vast or has cycles that repeat endlessly, you might have more Boltzmann brains flickering into and out of existence than you have stable planets and evolutionary histories. If that's the case, and if each Boltzmann brain experiences a momentary but convincing illusion of a full life, then it's statistically more common to be a Boltzmann brain than a person on a planet formed by normal cosmic processes. This parallels the argument from the simulation hypothesis about fake worlds potentially outnumbering real ones. Here, the fake experiences come from random chance in a huge cosmos. By sheer numbers, one might think it more probable that any given mind is just a fleeting Boltzmann brain than an actual inhabitant of a stable civilization. That means that if you wake up as a conscious being, you should not be too sure you have a genuine history and environment. So the puzzle shakes up our sense of certainty that we're living in a stable reality that has progressed from a Big Bang through billions of years of natural history. Naturally, this raises huge doubts. One major pushback is that it seems extremely improbable that a fully functional brain with coherent memories would spontaneously form. Yes, it's improbable, but maybe in an infinite timescale, improbable events become guaranteed eventually. Still, many physicists and cosmologists think that real galaxies, stars, planets, and evolutionary processes might be more likely or at least equally likely as random brain formations, or that the universe might not allow infinite time or conditions for these freak fluctuations. Another set of scientists try to argue that any universe that lasts long enough to spawn that many Boltzmann brains must have certain properties we do not observe, or that certain expansions or decays happen that would cut that possibility short. In short, not everyone accepts that Boltzmann brains pose a real threat to our sense of cosmic history. But the puzzle remains powerful because it demands we consider whether standard physics plus an immense stretch of time might yield mind-bogglingly strange outcomes. Some folks wonder if the Boltzmann brain concept is basically a modern fable about illusions. If you can conjure a random brain with invented memories, then none of us can be fully sure our recollections of childhood, school, or day-to-day routines reflect real events. The difference from the experience machine is that at least in the machine scenario, there was some advanced technology or person behind the illusions. Here, it's pure coincidence. The random cosmic tumble of particles just happens to align, for a fraction of a second, into a structure that thinks it's you living a normal life on Earth. Once that structure dissolves, the illusions vanish. The entire existence of that mini-consciousness is a cosmic fluke. If you imagine that's all you are, you see how deeply it undermines your confidence in memory. After all, every memory you hold dear could be nothing but a fleeting neural pattern with no real past behind it. It's unnerving, like the evil demon trick or the idea that the universe started 5 minutes ago. Yet it's grounded in serious physics that considers random fluctuations in the far future of the universe. So why do some scientists or philosophers even consider such an idea? It comes partly from attempts to understand how entropy, the measure of disorder in the universe, and random fluctuations might create ordered pockets. Boltzmann suggested that small regions of order might appear by chance in a sea of chaos if you wait long enough, though he didn't explicitly talk about brains spontaneously forming. Later thinkers took that notion to a dramatic extreme. If small lumps of order can appear, then possibly entire complicated structures, like brains with memory, might blink into being. If you are a being that sees a mostly ordered world around you, it might be more likely you came from a random fluctuation that just created an entire illusory environment in your mind, rather than living in a stable, physically evolved universe. That is the philosophical jab. Maybe your sense of a big, persistent cosmos is just a dream your momentary neural arrangement is having. But does that mean we should truly suspect we are lone Boltzmann brains in a cosmic void? Practically, no. Almost everyone who studies these issues says that if your environment is consistent, if you can test things repeatedly over time, and if other people confirm or share your experiences, it points strongly to a stable external reality. A random fluctuation that lasts a tiny fraction of a second can't create that many consistent interactions. The puzzle, though, remains logically open. Who's to say your entire sense of continuity and other people isn't just a single snapshot your instant brain thinks it's experiencing in a drawn-out way? One could wave away that possibility by saying it's too contrived or that real physics disallows it. But you can't easily prove that from basic principles alone. So it's an open headache for theories that rely on infinite or extremely large universes. Some even treat it as a sign that those theories might be wrong or incomplete, since we don't want a universe dominated by Boltzmann brains. There is also a personal angle. Maybe you find it silly to imagine your life might be a fraction of a second hallucination. But once the puzzle enters your mind, it can sometimes lurk there as a nagging notion. Are my memories guaranteed to reflect an actual chain of events that took place in a real environment, or am I, in cosmic terms, a flicker of improbable arrangement that thinks it had a whole lifetime? That would be a lonely outcome. There would be no real external world, no actual people besides the illusions in your memory. All the people you love or stories you share would be illusions that vanish when your random arrangement of matter disperses. It's arguably one of the saddest cosmic illusions you can think of, beating out the simpler illusions of an evil demon or a simulation. At least those illusions might exist for a reason. Here, it's pure randomness. The puzzle's shock value is that it suggests we can't fully rule out a scenario, so bleak by logic alone. Of course, you can also see how ephemeral a Boltzmann brain's existence would be. The minute it forms, it likely collapses. That means the entire experience of living decades would unroll in your mind instantly, leaving no time for second thoughts. The cosmic afterimage is gone. So maybe you should take comfort that you seem to be experiencing time in a normal, extended manner. That might argue we are not a single fleeting brain. Then again, the puzzle counters that we might just imagine we've experienced time, while physically no time is passing for that brain. This highlights how drastically the concept can twist your normal sense of progression and memories. In real life, you see continuous events, days passing, seasons changing, but if all that is happening in a flash of random neurons, the continuity is an illusion. That's deeply unsettling for those who like to trust the forward flow of time. Yet from a purely logical perspective, illusions can be extremely convincing if you start with the right arrangement of matter. Many scientists brush the scenario aside, saying it's too extreme a corner case or that certain cosmic conditions we observe rule it out as a major factor. Others incorporate it into advanced cosmological models, trying to see if our universe is shaped in such a way that we get more real observers, like we presumably are, than random brain observers. The hope is that the real cosmic processes that form galaxies and planets outnumber the sporadic events that might produce brains. If it turned out the random fluctuations produce more ephemeral brains than stable societies, some say that would be a major paradox or problem in cosmology, forcing us to rethink our models. One name for that problem is the Boltzmann brain problem. It's basically, we exist and see a stable environment, so presumably, we're part of a stable environment, not a random fluctuation. But if math says fluctuations are more common, we have a contradiction. Scientists use that contradiction as a sign to adjust or refine theories, so that stable worlds remain the main source of observers, not random brains. Meanwhile, from a philosophical standpoint, the puzzle can be less about actual astrophysics and more about whether your memory of a real life can be trusted if it's theoretically possible for illusions to pop into being. The same theme arises in many illusions of reality puzzles. But the Boltzmann brain puzzle stands out because it frames it in natural processes, not a trickster or a supercomputer. It underscores that illusions might arise from chance alone in a big enough cosmic timescale. Some find that more unsettling than the idea of a purposeful simulation, because at least a simulation suggests an intelligence behind the scenes. Here, You have only randomness giving a bizarre cameo to a lonely consciousness, then snuffing it out. That can feel even more pointless or chilling. Yet it also shows how we rely heavily on the assumption that the cosmic environment is stable, and that we formed in a normal biological, evolutionary manner on a planet with a real history. If we didn't rely on that, we might lose our mind with worry over the Boltzmann brain scenario. For everyday life, the Boltzmann brain puzzle likely won't change how you get groceries, talk to friends, or plan your future. But it might come to mind late at night when you reflect on the enormity of the universe, reminding you that some possibilities are so bizarre they border on comedic horror. If you try to prove to yourself you're not a Boltzmann brain, you'll realize it's not easy. You can say, "Look at all the consistent evidence around me," but a Boltzmann brain might be formed with an entire consistent story in its ephemeral mind. You can say, "But I see changes day to day," yet that too could be part of a false memory pattern. Still, as with many illusions of reality puzzles, it's possible to argue that the best explanation for your stable, shared experiences is that we truly exist in an ongoing physical environment, not a fleeting cosmic accident. Occam's razor, preferring simpler explanations, favors the idea that we are in a real, historically developed world rather than a single second of random brain formation that just so happens to generate all these illusions of a continuous life. So you can calmly go on trusting your senses, acknowledging that while the Boltzmann brain scenario is logically possible in some cosmic theories, it's not the best bet for how you exist. Another reason this puzzle can be valuable is to highlight how big numbers and infinite spans twist our usual sense of what's possible. If the universe is infinite, or if it repeats cycles infinitely, the strangest events might occur somewhere. That alone is a lesson in humility about cosmic scale. The Boltzmann brain puzzle is an extreme example showing that given enough random tries, something as intricate as a fully formed brain might appear momentarily. Of course, we might guess that once you start factoring in all the improbabilities, even an infinite cosmos might not produce enough tries for that to happen often, but it is not impossible. So it becomes a test of how comfortable we are with improbable events turning into near certainties given infinite rolls of the dice. Yet some cosmologists do see the puzzle as a real problem for certain multiverse or infinite universe theories. If a theory predicts that Boltzmann brains outnumber normal observers, we end up in a contradiction because we find ourselves living in what looks like a stable environment, not a fleeting mental blip. So that suggests we either must accept that scenario is false or that the theory is incomplete. This shows how a seemingly silly puzzle can actually influence serious scientific debates about the shape and future of the universe. It's not just a random philosophical quirk. It's a pointer to how some cosmic theories might need constraints or expansions to avoid letting Boltzmann brains dominate the count of conscious minds. For someone reading or hearing about this puzzle for the first time, the question often becomes, okay, so is there a chance I'm a Boltzmann brain? In principle, yes, but it's so overwhelmingly small and short-lived that it's hard to take practically. Also, because you experience a continuous sense of life with consistent laws of physics, it's more plausible you belong to a stable world. If you were truly a Boltzmann brain, you'd only think you have continuity, but the moment you blink in, you also blink out. That's a fraction of a second phenomenon, leaving no real chance for further input. So the fact that you appear to observe changes over time might argue strongly you are not one. Then again, the puzzle counters that the illusions might be thorough enough to fake even the sense of time passing in your consciousness. We come full circle to the typical illusions of reality stance. You can't strictly prove it's not the case, but it's rational to place your trust in the normal explanation. In a sense, the Boltzmann brain puzzle is like a cosmic dream scenario. What if the dream is your entire life story, formed in an instant, and about to vanish just as quickly? Dream illusions occur in a sleeping mind's short bursts, so it's not too different to picture cosmic randomness forming a sleeping mind that hallucinates a lifetime. The difference is we rely on normal biology and neural processes for dreams, while Boltzmann brains rely on random atomic arrangement. That might be even less likely than a typical dream, but if the universe is truly huge or eternal, less likely might still happen eventually. For some, the puzzle ends up shining light on how improbable or misguided it might be to assume an infinite future or infinite space with random fluctuations. If we hate the Boltzmann brain conclusion, maybe that helps us shape theories that avoid it. Another interesting point is that if a Boltzmann brain arises, it doesn't just see illusions, it also might hold illusions about an entire cosmos with billions of stars, a planet, and a personal timeline that goes back decades. In that sense, it's a mini-cosmos in the mind, skipping the real cosmic evolution. If you consider illusions from puzzles like the simulation hypothesis or the philosophical zombie scenario, this puzzle stands out because it doesn't rely on advanced technology or conscious deceivers. It's purely the result of random collisions of particles over unthinkable time. That raw chance approach can feel more disturbing, because it implies there's no guiding reason for the illusions. They simply happen, with no plan or purpose. This bleakness can either amuse or horrify, or maybe both. Still, we circle back to the practical conclusion that we seldom truly suspect we are Boltzmann brains. Our environment is too consistent, we share it with other minds that seemingly check out, and the best explanation is that we've developed in a normal physical reality. But the puzzle remains as a guardrail, reminding us how logic can lead to bizarre possibilities. It humbles us by highlighting how cosmic scales can produce improbable states that challenge our sense of a reliable, ongoing past. It's part of the broader theme of illusions in this documentary, just as we can doubt our entire universe might be real, simulation hypothesis, or doubt that others are conscious, philosophical zombies, we can also doubt whether our entire life story has any actual basis. Maybe, as a fleeting brain bubble, we just imagine a lifetime in a cosmic instant. Like the other puzzles, it might help us see how deeply we rely on trust in external evidence, like the consistent laws of physics, shared human history, and records that line up. All of that points to a real world existing beyond our minds. The Boltzmann brain scenario says that maybe the entire consistency you see is part of your passing hallucination. But if you try to gather new evidence over time, you find that evidence also fits a stable world. So you settle into believing that the stable world is the best explanation for the data you keep collecting. That's effectively how we push aside the Boltzmann brain worry in normal life. Yet in the purely logical sense, the puzzle is not fully beaten, since illusions can be so thorough if the improbable event is big enough. It's just extremely unlikely to be the best explanation. So, day to day, we can safely act as though we're not Boltzmann brains. Still, the possibility reminds us, absolute certainty is elusive when it comes to these cosmic illusions. One might also see parallels with short dreams or daydreams, except that daydreams happen in a physical brain that has a real past. The Boltzmann brain scenario is weirder, because the entire physical structure is spontaneously conjured, no normal biology or prior development behind it. That radical difference underscores the puzzle's core. If you trust your background of real evolution and continuous personal growth, you presumably trust you are not a random fluctuation. If you can't rely on that, you have no guarantee. In that sense, it's one more arrow in the quiver of illusions of reality questions that push what if your entire life is just a mental moment. To connect it with illusions from evolution or illusions from a perfect experience device, those illusions revolve around us being shaped by hidden forces, but we still exist over time, even if we're deluded about details. Boltzmann brains might not even have that time scale. It's like the smallest possible window of existence, jam-packed with illusions of a long story. Some find that scenario so lonely that they're glad to dismiss it. Others see it as no more lonely than the scenario that our entire cosmos might be a program. Each puzzle is a different flavor of maybe it's not what we think. That's the unifying theme. But the Boltzmann brain might be the bleakest version, because there is no advanced civilization or hidden purpose behind it. There's just random cosmic roll of the dice. The sense of meaning we glean from it is purely accidental. If you are that single momentary brain, no cosmic watchers or programmers even exist. It's just you, blinking in and out, forever alone in a vast emptiness. In that regard, the puzzle might actually help highlight how good we have it if we do indeed live in a stable environment with real time and real connections. If you compare that to the cosmic lottery that spawns you for an instant, well, stable existence seems far more fulfilling. So, ironically, the puzzle might make you appreciate normal life more. It also fosters gratitude that we can gather evidence across days, months, or years, watch ourselves grow older, and see others do the same, which strongly suggests we're not a random momentary blip. In that way, it's akin to a be thankful we're not in that scenario reflection. Another beneficial lesson is about how improbable events can be forced to appear if time or space is infinite. We talk about a monkey randomly typing Shakespeare or given infinite time, everything happens. The Boltzmann brain idea is the ultimate version, where random matter forms a conscious mind, illusions and all. People sometimes like to say that if you let monkeys bang on typewriters for eternity, eventually they produce all the great works of literature. This is the cosmic scale version, except the monkeys are random particle fluctuations, and the works of literature is a whole set of complex memories that fool a spontaneously formed brain. The puzzle makes us question how to handle the weird outcomes of infinite possibilities. Some scientists believe this indicates that the universe might not actually be infinite in that sense, or that it has expansions or heat deaths that prevent indefinite random fluctuations at large scales. But that debate belongs to advanced cosmology. Philosophically, the puzzle's main role is to crack open our usual sense that we can trust our memories just because they feel so detailed and consistent. Stepping away from the cosmic scale, it can also mirror personal illusions. If you woke up from a dream that gave you a vivid sense of an entire lifetime, you might recall how you felt disoriented, thinking, did I just live many years in a dream? Boltzmann brains are the dream scenario turned into a cosmic event. The difference is that a dream depends on a real brain with a prior existence. A Boltzmann brain is spontaneously assembled by random collisions of atoms in deep space, like a dream with no dreamer behind it. This pushes illusions to the extreme edge of logic, reinforcing how illusions might not need a dreamer or simulator, just random assembly. That can be both fascinating and disquieting. So what do we do with this puzzle in the end? Much like the earlier ones, it's not here to provide a neat solution. It's here to test how stable we believe our memories and environment are. If someone said, "Prove you're not a Boltzmann brain," you might gather all sorts of ongoing observations and consistent checks that confirm you share a coherent world with others. That's decent evidence that you're in a normal, long-lived cosmos, not a short blip. But the puzzle says in principle, illusions can mimic that data in your mind. We get into the territory of sure, illusions might mimic it, but that's extremely far-fetched, which is the same kind of reasoning we use for many illusions of reality puzzles. Ultimately, the puzzle can enrich your appreciation of the normal logic we rely on, like trusting consistent observations over time, and highlight how illusions can stretch the boundaries of what's logically or physically possible in extreme cases. It also pairs well with the other reality benders. If you recall the experience machine, that was an artificial device that ensures perfect illusions. A Boltzmann brain is more like an unplanned glitch of the cosmos, spontaneously conjuring illusions. Both lead you to doubt the reliability of your sense of genuine history. The difference is that the experience machine is typically a choice, you decide whether or not to plug in, whereas being a Boltzmann brain is pure chance, with you having no say. The result, though, can be equally thorough illusions. The philosophical zombie puzzle deals with whether outward behavior matches an inner experience. The Boltzmann brain deals with whether your entire environment and past might be invented by random chance. Each puzzle picks a different angle on how illusions might arise, and each one can leave us momentarily speechless about how confident we should be in the normalcy of our experiences. As we move forward from this puzzle, keep in mind that while the Boltzmann brain concept often feels more outlandish than the others, it's still taken seriously enough in certain corners of theoretical physics that people talk about it as a known challenge. Some even shape their cosmological models to avoid a Boltzmann brain-dominated universe. Regardless of the scientific details, the philosophical point stands: your entire personal timeline, from learning to walk, going to school, making friends, might theoretically be conjured in a single cosmic wink. That possibility, as small as it might be, underscores how illusions can strike at the heart of memory itself. If illusions can replicate a lifetime's worth of recollections, then maybe raw memory is not a perfect window to real history. For most of us, that's enough to see how easily we could be fooled if cosmic chance or clever illusions line up just right. But, as with all these illusions of reality puzzles, we typically return to normal life, concluding that the easiest explanation is that we do have a shared, continuous environment. That conclusion is not proven absolutely, it's the best guess based on daily experience and reasoning. The Boltzmann brain puzzle doesn't force you to adopt a new worldview, but it reveals a deep vulnerability in your trust that the past you remember truly happened in a long-lasting, external world. By exploring it, you train your mind to consider extreme possibilities and see how they can't be trivially dismissed, even if they remain improbable. And that mental exercise is the real gift of these philosophical questions. They expand your mental boundaries, letting you see how stable reality might only look stable because we expect it to be so. Whether you find that exhilarating or scary, the puzzle has done its job of pushing your sense of what's possible. It's one more step in this series of challenges to everyday assumptions. First, that your universe could be a simulation. Second, that other people might be soulless shells. Third, that a perfect fantasy might tempt you away from real life. And now that your entire past might be a fleeting daydream of a randomly formed brain. Taken together, these scenarios underscore how easy it is to imagine cracks in what we consider ordinary reality. In one sense, it's humbling. In another sense, it's exciting, because it shows how creative the human mind can be in exploring the frontiers of knowledge and illusion. That sense of wonder, or caution, or both, is exactly why we spend time on these puzzles in a documentary like this. As you reflect on the Boltzmann brain scenario specifically, you might discover a renewed appreciation for the real continuity we see around us, the daily changes that accumulate, the family photos that show you growing older, the existence of records and histories that align across many people's perspectives. All of those details make it extremely likely we're not ephemeral illusions ourselves. But the puzzle remains a philosophical cartoon in the corner of your mind, whispering, yes, but you can't absolutely exclude it if the cosmos is large enough. And that's the point. It's the ultimate cosmic curveball, a reminder that as soon as we imagine infinite possibilities, we open the door to truly bizarre outcomes. Moving on from here, we continue our exploration with yet another question about illusions, focusing on how evolution might make illusions rather than truths beneficial to our survival. If random chance can produce illusions in cosmic extremes, maybe nature can produce illusions in daily life because they help us endure or succeed. Where the Boltzmann brain is about a lonely second in the darkness of space, our next puzzle is about how illusions can be baked into how we see ourselves and the world, even in a normal, ongoing environment, potentially shaping our success and outlook. Each puzzle stands on its own, but they weave together an overall tapestry of how reality might be far more layered and flexible than we assume when we get up each morning. So for now, let's put aside the lone, drifting Boltzmann brain and look at how illusions might help or harm us in our everyday existence. Part 5, Evolutionary Illusions. Imagine for a moment that every day, as you wake up, go to school, hang out with friends, and face the little challenges of life, your brain is quietly working behind the scenes in ways you might not even notice. It turns out that our minds might not always show us the full, unfiltered truth of the world. Instead, they sometimes create little shortcuts, illusions, that make life seem a bit brighter, even if those shortcuts don't always match up with objective facts. Over the next stretch of our journey together, we're going to explore the idea that our brains, shaped by millions of years of evolution, might be wired to prefer comforting illusions over harsh truths. This isn't about tricking yourself on purpose or ignoring reality, it's about understanding why sometimes you might feel extra hopeful even when things are tough, and why a bit of self-deception can sometimes help you survive and thrive. Let's start with a simple idea. Every living thing has to deal with challenges, and sometimes the truth can be really hard to handle. Imagine you're about to take a really difficult test. The reality might be that you're not fully prepared, and the chances of doing well are slim. But instead of focusing on those scary odds, your brain might whisper, "You've got this." It might boost your confidence just enough to get you to try harder and put in more effort. This little bit of over-optimism isn't about lying to yourself, it's about giving you the strength to act even when the facts are not so encouraging. Over time, this optimistic bias, this tendency to see things a bit more positively than they really are, has helped people and animals take risks, learn new skills, and ultimately survive in a world full of uncertainties. Now, consider the way many of us see the world. Often, you might catch yourself thinking, everything's going to work out, even if the situation is far from perfect. That thought might make you feel a little lighter, even if deep down you know there's a chance things might not go as planned. This is an example of what scientists call a positive illusion. It's like your brain has a pair of rose-tinted glasses that help you see the bright side of life. For example, when you face a setback, you might quickly remind yourself that one failure doesn't define you. This mental trick helps you bounce back and keep trying, which is a very useful ability. In the long run, that little boost of optimism can mean the difference between giving up and finding a way to succeed. Think about it in another way. If every time you encountered a problem, you focused solely on the negative possibilities, you might never get off the ground. Imagine a young bird learning to fly. If it were constantly paralyzed by the fear of falling, it might never take the leap from its nest. Instead, nature has designed it so that the bird feels a certain boldness, a bit of overconfidence, that pushes it to spread its wings. Even if there's a chance it might tumble a few times before it learns how to soar, that optimism is crucial for its survival. Similarly, human evolution seems to have favored those who can, at least sometimes, ignore the full weight of reality in favor of a view that inspires action. Our ancestors, facing predators, harsh climates, and scarce resources, might have benefited from a mindset that allowed them to take necessary risks, even if those risks were based on a slightly skewed perception of reality. Our brains are amazing organs that have developed over countless generations to help us not only process information but also to make decisions that enhance our chances of survival. One part of that decision-making process involves what you might call mental shortcuts. Instead of always calculating every possible outcome in exact detail, a process that would be slow and exhausting, your brain often uses simple rules of thumb. These mental shortcuts can sometimes lead to illusions. For instance, many people tend to overestimate their ability to control events. You might think that by wishing hard enough or by taking a little extra action, you can change the course of events. This illusion of control is common and can be very helpful in situations where belief itself drives better performance. Even if your actual power to change things is limited, feeling in control can reduce anxiety and encourage you to take on challenges. Another example is how we sometimes remember events as being better than they really were. Have you ever looked back on a fun day with friends and remembered it as absolutely perfect, even though there were small annoyances or disagreements that you've since forgotten? That's another form of a mental illusion, where your memory is filtered to show you only the best parts. In evolutionary terms, this can be useful. If you constantly remembered every tiny disappointment, you might get overwhelmed and depressed, which in turn could affect your ability to cope with future challenges. Instead, a slightly rosier memory can help you maintain motivation and happiness, even if it means that your recollections aren't 100% accurate. On the flip side, our brains are sometimes prone to negative illusions as well, such as excessive pessimism or anxiety. For some people, the fear of failure or rejection might be so strong that they start to see the worst-case scenarios more clearly than the likely outcomes. This can hold them back from trying new things or taking risks, even when those risks are necessary for growth. Evolutionarily, having some degree of caution is important, but too much can be paralyzing. In those cases, a mild positive bias can balance things out, encouraging a person to move forward despite uncertainties. Evolution seems to have favored a delicate balance between optimism and caution, enough optimism to take risks and enough caution to avoid unnecessary dangers. These mental illusions, both positive and negative, are not random. They have been shaped by the pressures of survival. For our ancestors, living in a world where dangers were frequent and resources were limited, having a brain that could filter reality in a way that promoted action was a huge advantage. Even if it meant that they sometimes saw the world a little differently from the objective facts, that difference might have meant the difference between life and death. Imagine an early human who is about to face a dangerous predator. If that person is overly pessimistic, they might freeze up and miss the chance to run or fight. But if they have just enough optimism to believe they can escape, they might survive the encounter. Over countless generations, those little biases, those illusions that help a person overcome fear and uncertainty, become embedded in our psychology. This evolutionary perspective on illusions isn't just about survival in the wild, it also has implications for how we deal with everyday stress and challenges in modern life. Today, you might not face predators in the forest, but you do encounter stresses like exams, social pressures, and uncertainties about the future. The same brain that helped our ancestors run from a lion now helps you tackle a difficult math test by allowing you to focus on your strengths and believe in a positive outcome. Even though the test might be challenging, that little boost of optimism can improve your performance and reduce anxiety. In a sense, our minds have built-in mechanisms to help us cope with stress, even if they sometimes bend the truth a bit. Consider another everyday example, the way you might feel about trying something new, like joining a sports team or auditioning for a school play. The reality might be that there's a high chance of not being chosen or making mistakes, but your brain might give you just enough self-confidence to take that step. That self-confidence is a kind of illusion, a belief in your ability to succeed that might not perfectly match the odds, but which motivates you to act. Without that boost, you might never try at all, and you would miss out on experiences that could lead to personal growth and achievement. It's a simple, almost automatic process. Your mind tells you, I can do it, even if you don't have all the evidence. Over time, that belief often proves self-fulfilling, because it pushes you to practice, learn, and improve. In evolutionary terms, the ability to trick yourself into taking a risk when needed is a survival advantage, even if it sometimes leads to failure. The risk is worth it if it increases your overall chance of success. Yet, not all illusions are beneficial. Sometimes, the same mental shortcuts can lead to errors in judgment that might hurt you in the long run. For example, if you overestimate your control over events too much, you might take risks that end in serious consequences. Imagine someone who is so sure that they can defy gravity that they ignore safety measures when playing sports. While a moderate illusion of control can boost performance, an extreme version might lead to reckless behavior. Similarly, if you remember events as being much better or worse than they really were, you might make decisions based on skewed memories. It's like trying to navigate with a map that has a few details exaggerated or omitted. It might work well enough in some cases, but sometimes it can lead you astray. Our brains must strike a balance between accuracy and helpful optimism. Evolution seems to have tuned that balance to favor survival in most cases, even if it sometimes means the picture we hold in our minds isn't exactly the same as what is out there. There is also an interesting twist when it comes to social interactions. Many times, people naturally tend to give others the benefit of the doubt. When a friend says, "I'll be there for you," you feel comforted because you trust that they mean it. This trust is partly built on your shared experiences and the belief that other people have inner lives similar to your own. But what if, deep down, your brain is wired to assume that everyone sees the world in a slightly more positive light than they actually do? That could be an evolutionary advantage. By believing that others are generally kind and supportive, you build stronger bonds and work better together as a community. Even if that belief is a bit of an illusion, it might help maintain social harmony and cooperation, which are essential for survival in groups. On the flip side, if you were too skeptical and assumed that everyone is out for themselves, it might lead to loneliness or conflict. So, a gentle bias toward optimism in social relationships can be seen as a useful, if not strictly accurate, illusion. Another everyday example is how you might handle failure or setbacks. Think about a time when something didn't go as planned. Maybe you didn't get the grade you hoped for on a test, or you didn't make the sports team you tried out for. In those moments, a little self-deception might kick in. You might convince yourself that the test wasn't fair, or that the team wasn't really a good fit, even if the reality is a bit harsher. This self-deception, this way of softening the blow of failure, can help you recover more quickly and try again. If you took every failure as an absolute confirmation that you're not good enough, you might never try anything challenging. Instead, a moderated illusion that gives you hope, even if it's not 100% accurate, can propel you forward and help you build resilience. That resilience, built over generations, might have been the key to survival for our ancestors in a world full of unpredictable dangers and frequent hardships. It is important to realize that these evolutionary illusions are not about lying or being dishonest. They are built into our very nature. Our brains have been shaped by the pressures of survival and reproduction over countless generations. In a dangerous world, being able to see a bit of hope even when things are grim can encourage you to take risks and keep moving forward. This isn't about ignoring reality altogether. It's about filtering it in a way that makes you stronger and more capable. The same brain that helps a bird muster the courage to fly off its nest in search of food is also the one that helps you feel optimistic when you face a tough day at school. That natural boost might not always give you a perfect picture of the world, but it makes life more bearable, and sometimes even more exciting. Yet, these helpful illusions can sometimes backfire. If you become too detached from reality, you might make decisions that aren't based on facts. For instance, if you convince yourself that nothing bad can ever happen, you might ignore warnings or take risks that end in injury. There is a fine line between a beneficial bias and a dangerous distortion of reality. In many cases, the evolutionary advantage comes from a moderate illusion, just enough to boost your morale without completely distorting your judgment. It's like walking on a slightly curved path that helps you stay on track, rather than a completely false map that leads you into a dead end. Scientists study these biases in psychology to understand how they influence decision-making, motivation, and even long-term success. Another aspect to consider is the role of culture in shaping these illusions. Over time, societies develop shared beliefs and narratives that often include a healthy dose of optimism, even if those beliefs are not entirely accurate. Folk tales, myths, and even modern movies sometimes emphasize the power of hope and the idea that a positive outlook can overcome almost any obstacle. These cultural stories reinforce the natural biases in our brains, making us more likely to see the world in a favorable light. They teach us that while hard truths are important, the ability to look on the bright side and maintain hope is equally valuable. In this way, culture and evolution work together to create a kind of collective illusion that helps a society survive difficult times. That doesn't mean that these stories are lies, they are, in a sense, simplified versions of reality that help us cope and connect with one another. Social media and modern technology have added a new twist to this ancient strategy. Many people now curate their online lives to present a version of themselves that is happy, successful, and free of hardship. Even though we know that everyone has their own struggles, the images we see online often create an illusion that life is better than it really is. This modern phenomenon is a continuation of the evolutionary bias towards optimism, amplified by technology. While it can inspire and motivate, it can also lead to unrealistic expectations and disappointment when reality does not match up with the idealized image. In both cases, whether it's in our personal memories or our online profiles, a bit of self-deception can help us navigate the challenges of life, but only if we keep it in balance with honest reflections. The idea of evolutionary illusions also makes us question how much of our own personality is shaped by these biases. When you're proud of your ability to stay positive in the face of adversity, that pride might partly come from the fact that your brain is wired to see the silver lining. When you admire someone for their optimism, you're not just recognizing a personality trait, you're also witnessing an evolutionary strategy that has helped people survive through hard times. Even if that optimism sometimes makes you overlook problems or take unnecessary risks, it is also a reminder that life's challenges are often met with resilience and hope. This dual nature of our mental wiring shows that while illusions might not always be true in the objective sense, they serve a very real purpose in helping us live better lives. Sometimes, these evolutionary biases manifest in what is called the illusion of control. This is when you believe you can influence outcomes in situations that are largely governed by chance. For example, you might toss a coin repeatedly and feel that you can nudge it to land the way you want, or you might believe that wearing a lucky shirt will help you win a game. In many cases, this illusion is harmless and even beneficial because it gives you the confidence to try. Confidence is an important driver for action. It helps you take risks, experiment, and learn from your mistakes. However, if the illusion of control is too strong, it might lead you to ignore real dangers or overestimate your abilities. The balance between healthy optimism and reckless overconfidence is delicate, and evolution appears to have favored a middle path that gives you enough belief in yourself to act, while still keeping you cautious enough to learn from failure. In our everyday lives, you might also notice that sometimes your memories seem a little too rosy. When you think back on a fun day at a park or a family gathering, you might remember it as being even happier than it really was. This selective memory is another kind of evolutionary illusion. It smooths over the small annoyances and negative moments, allowing you to hold on to the good feelings. Over time, this can boost your overall mood and help you cope with life's difficulties. But it can also distort your sense of reality if you start to ignore important lessons that come from less pleasant experiences. Evolution has favored this kind of bias because it helps people maintain a positive outlook, even if it isn't 100% accurate. There is also the concept of self-deception, where you might unconsciously ignore or downplay information that could hurt your self-esteem. For example, if you're facing a difficult situation like a tough exam or a personal setback, your mind might focus on past successes or downplay the negative feedback you receive. This self-deception can help you keep your spirits up and motivate you to keep trying, even when the odds aren't in your favor. It is not that you are lying to yourself in a deliberate way, rather, your brain is automatically filtering the information to protect you from excessive stress and despair. In evolutionary terms, this can be seen as a survival mechanism. If you're constantly overwhelmed by negative thoughts, you might give up on trying to overcome challenges. On the other hand, too much self-deception can also be problematic. If you ignore warning signs or refuse to face reality, you might make decisions that lead to real harm. For instance, if you convince yourself that nothing bad can happen, you might take dangerous risks without proper precautions. In a balanced view, a little self-deception helps you cope and be resilient, but it should not prevent you from learning from your mistakes. This balance is something that many people struggle with, and it is at the heart of why discussions about evolutionary illusions are so important. They encourage us to examine how our mental shortcuts help and sometimes hinder us. The benefits of evolutionary illusions extend even into the realm of creativity and innovation. Often, great inventions and works of art come from a willingness to imagine a better version of reality, even if that vision is not entirely grounded in what is immediately observable. When you allow yourself to believe in a possibility that isn't fully supported by the current facts, you open the door to creativity. That imaginative leap, while it may start as a slight departure from reality, is what often leads to breakthroughs. Our minds are wired to explore possibilities, even ones that seem a bit unrealistic at first, and that drive to innovate is partly powered by our evolutionary tendency to see the world in a more optimistic light. In that way, evolutionary illusions are not just personal biases, they are also the fuel for progress. They help you dream big, take risks, and eventually achieve goals that once seemed impossible. It's interesting to see how these ideas play out in sports, school, and everyday challenges. Imagine you are part of a team trying to win a championship. Even if the odds are stacked against you, the belief that you can win might push everyone to train harder and play with more heart. That belief is an illusion in the sense that it might not be completely based on cold, hard statistics, but it is also a vital part of what makes teamwork and competition exciting and rewarding. Without that spark of optimism, many teams might not dare to compete, and many individuals might not push themselves to achieve their potential. In that sense, evolutionary illusions help create a positive feedback loop. Your belief in success encourages actions that increase the chances of success, which in turn reinforces your belief. That cycle, even if not perfectly aligned with objective probabilities, has helped humans overcome challenges throughout history. Social interactions, too, are full of these gentle deceptions. When you see someone smile at you, you naturally assume they are happy to see you, even if they might be masking a little sadness or worry. That assumption helps you feel connected and build trust. It's a form of optimism that smooths out the rough edges of communication. In group settings, people often present themselves in the best possible light, downplaying their faults and exaggerating their strengths. While this might not give you a completely accurate picture of someone's inner life, it makes it easier to form bonds and work together. That shared sense of optimism can be incredibly powerful in building communities and fostering cooperation, even if it means that everyone's view of themselves is a bit more positive than reality might dictate. In many cultures, there is a saying that seeing the glass half full is a sign of wisdom. It reflects the idea that sometimes, focusing on the positive can lead to better outcomes than being weighed down by every negative detail. This simple philosophy is mirrored in our brain's natural tendencies. Our ancestors who managed to see a little light in the darkest times were often the ones who survived long enough to pass on their genes. Even if they didn't see the whole truth about their situation, that extra dose of hope made them more likely to fight, to gather food, or to care for their families. Today, that same bias can help you persevere through challenges like a tough class, a difficult project, or a personal setback. It's an ancient strategy for survival that, although it might not give you a perfectly objective view, has helped humanity thrive in a world full of uncertainties. Of course, there is a flip side. While a bit of optimism is good, too much can lead to dangerous overconfidence. If you believe that everything will always turn out well, you might ignore warning signs or take risks that lead to harm. This is why it's important for our brains to strike a balance between positive illusions and realistic assessments. Evolution has tuned this balance over countless generations, so that you generally have enough optimism to motivate you but not so much that you become reckless. The trick is that sometimes, this balance can tip in one direction or the other, depending on your environment or personal history. For some people, past experiences might have made them overly cautious or pessimistic, while others might lean so far into optimism that they overlook genuine challenges. Understanding that this balance is not perfect, and that it is, in part, an evolutionary compromise, can help you become more aware of your own mental shortcuts. It's fascinating to realize that these mental shortcuts are not flaws but features that have evolved for a very good reason. They save time and energy. Instead of analyzing every situation with a microscope of logic, your brain uses simple rules that work well in most cases. When you encounter a problem, you might quickly decide that everything will be okay, even if that decision isn't based on a detailed analysis. That fast decision-making, fueled by a little bit of optimism or self-deception, can be a lifesaver in situations where hesitation could cost you dearly. Imagine being chased by a predator. If you stop to calculate the exact probability of escape, you might freeze. Instead, a quick, optimistic decision to run, even if it isn't perfectly rational, can be the difference between life and death. That same principle applies in everyday life, albeit in less dramatic ways. Another everyday example is the way you might approach trying something new, like joining a club or starting a hobby. Even if you're not sure you'll be good at it, a little self-confidence, or a belief in your own ability, can push you to give it a try. If you are too objective and weigh every possible negative outcome, you might never take the first step. Your brain's tendency to lean towards a positive outlook gives you the courage to begin, and that small leap of faith can lead to new friendships, skills, and successes. Over time, these positive experiences build on each other, reinforcing the idea that a little optimism is not only harmless but actually beneficial. Some scientists have even studied these biases in the lab, asking people to perform tasks and then measuring how their expectations affected their performance. The results often show that a bit of self-deception, a little overestimation of one's abilities, can improve performance in certain contexts. That doesn't mean you should ignore reality altogether, but it does mean that a slight distortion, seeing the glass as half full rather than half empty, can sometimes help you perform better under pressure. It's a neat trick that evolution has favored, because individuals who could muster extra hope in tough times were more likely to persevere, adapt, and eventually succeed. This built-in optimism has become part of what makes us human and drives much of our personal and collective progress. Socially, these evolutionary illusions also play a role in how communities form and function. When you're part of a group, a shared positive outlook can create a sense of unity and trust. Even if everyone's view of reality is a bit tinted with optimism, that shared perspective can help a community work together, support each other, and overcome hardships. It's similar to how a sports team might rally around a belief that they can win, even when the odds are not in their favor. That collective optimism can be contagious, inspiring each member to contribute and stay motivated. In this way, even if the outlook is not perfectly objective, it has the practical benefit of keeping people united and resilient. The fact that our brains sometimes choose a brighter version of reality is not a sign of weakness, it is a strength that has allowed human societies to flourish. There is also the fascinating phenomenon of the illusion of control, where you might feel that you can influence outcomes even in situations that are largely random. Think about when you toss a coin and, after many flips, you begin to believe that you can somehow nudge it to land the way you want. While you know logically that the coin is random, that sense of control gives you the confidence to try again. It's a bit like the self-confidence you get before a big performance or competition. Even if the result is uncertain, believing you have some control can spur you on to achieve more. This illusion is another example of how our mental shortcuts work to keep us motivated, even if they aren't perfectly aligned with reality. In many cases, that belief in control can lead to better outcomes, because if you believe you can make a difference, you're more likely to take action. However, if that illusion becomes too strong, it might lead you to underestimate risks, so the trick is to find a healthy balance. At the same time, these positive illusions are not meant to be permanent detours from the truth. Instead, they are like temporary boosts that help you get through a challenging moment. Just as you might put on sunglasses on a very bright day to protect your eyes, your brain might use a little self-deception to shield you from the harsh glare of reality. But once the challenge is over, you're expected to take off those sunglasses and see things as they really are. In evolutionary terms, having a flexible system that can sometimes distort reality for the sake of survival, and then return to an accurate perception when needed, offers the best of both worlds. You get the encouragement to face danger or uncertainty without being blinded by excessive optimism, while still having the capacity to learn from mistakes and adjust your behavior based on real information. There is also a cultural side to these evolutionary illusions. Throughout history, societies have developed stories, myths, and traditions that emphasize hope, perseverance, and the belief that good will eventually triumph over adversity. These cultural narratives often exaggerate positive aspects of life, encouraging people to focus on possibilities rather than limitations. Over time, these shared illusions become part of a community's identity, strengthening bonds and giving people a common sense of purpose. In many ways, these cultural illusions are just an extension of the individual biases that our brains have evolved, reinforcing one another to create a collective optimism that can carry a society through tough times. Even if some of the details are not strictly true, the overall effect can be deeply beneficial, creating a social atmosphere where people support each other and strive for common goals. Modern technology, too, can amplify these effects. For instance, social media often shows people presenting their best selves, a carefully curated version of reality that might not capture all the ups and downs of everyday life. This can lead to an illusion of perfection where it seems like everyone is happy, successful, and carefree. While that might boost your mood temporarily, it can also set unrealistic expectations that make you doubt your own experiences. The same bias that once helped our ancestors remain hopeful in the face of danger now sometimes creates pressure in our digital lives. It is a reminder that while a bit of optimism can be a gift, too much can lead to misunderstanding and dissatisfaction if you start comparing your real experiences with idealized images. The science of psychology has shown that these evolutionary illusions have measurable effects on how we perform tasks, handle stress, and even recover from setbacks. Studies reveal that individuals who maintain a moderately optimistic outlook tend to bounce back from failures more quickly than those who dwell on negative outcomes. That resilience, in turn, has been linked to better physical health, stronger relationships, and even increased longevity. In other words, a little bit of self-deception can be a powerful tool in making life more bearable and even successful. This doesn't mean that you should completely ignore reality or live in a fantasy world. Instead, it means that sometimes, bending the truth in your mind, just enough to keep you moving forward, can be a survival mechanism that has been fine-tuned over countless generations. It is also interesting to consider how these evolutionary illusions interact with our desire for meaning. Many people have an innate need to feel that their lives have purpose, that their actions matter in the grand scheme of things. Sometimes, the hard facts of reality can be harsh, and facing them head-on might make life feel overwhelming. In those moments, a slight distortion of reality, a gentle, hopeful bias, can provide comfort and a sense of direction. You might convince yourself that even a small victory is significant, or that every setback is just a step toward a greater triumph. That belief, even if not perfectly aligned with objective truth, gives your life a narrative that is worth pursuing. It is as if your brain, through its evolutionary wiring, has decided that life's meaning is too precious to be marred by too much harshness. Yet, these illusions can be a double-edged sword. While they boost confidence and resilience, they can also lead to complacency if overused. If you believe too strongly that everything will always turn out well, you might ignore real warning signs or fail to take necessary precautions. It's like driving a car with the assumption that nothing can go wrong. You might not pay enough attention to the road. The key is balance. Our brains have evolved to keep us motivated without completely shutting off our ability to learn from negative experiences. When you face a challenge and your optimism is tempered by a realistic sense of risk, you are more likely to learn and adapt. This balanced state is the sweet spot that evolution seems to have favored, not so much illusion that you become reckless, but not so much realism that you become paralyzed by fear. Another everyday example is the way you might cheer yourself up after a setback. Imagine you fail a test that you really cared about. Instead of letting the failure crush your spirit, you remind yourself that one test does not define you, that you have learned from the experience, and that you can do better next time. This self-talk is a form of positive illusion. It smooths over the sting of failure and gives you the energy to try again. Over time, that small bit of optimism builds your confidence and makes you more willing to take on challenges in the future. It's a process that may not always lead to perfect outcomes, but it helps you keep going, which is one of the most important aspects of life. In social situations, these evolutionary biases also help you build trust and form bonds with others. When you meet someone new, you quickly form impressions about whether they are friendly, reliable, or kind. Often, these impressions are influenced by a shared optimistic view of life. You might assume that, deep down, they have good intentions and that they feel happiness and empathy similar to your own. That assumption allows you to connect with people more easily, to form friendships, and to cooperate in groups. Without that common, if slightly idealized, view of human nature, interactions might become more guarded and less fulfilling. Even if it's a little bit of an illusion, believing that others are generally good and capable of genuine emotion can create a positive environment for everyone involved. Some researchers even suggest that our brains might exaggerate positive aspects of our social interactions as a way to smooth over conflicts or to reinforce social bonds. For example, when you remember a family dinner, you might recall it as being more joyful and loving than it might have been in all its messy details. That selective memory can help strengthen your relationships, making you more resilient to the occasional disagreements or misunderstandings that naturally occur. In this sense, a bit of self-deception about how perfect things are can be a glue that holds social groups together. It allows people to overlook minor flaws and focus on the shared, deeper connection that binds them. At the same time, it's important to note that these positive illusions do not mean that we are blind to reality. Most of the time, our brains adjust and show us a reasonably accurate picture of the world. They simply add a little extra light where it might be needed, much like turning up a lamp in a dark room. This extra light can help you see obstacles more clearly, even if it also brightens the picture a bit more than the strict facts would. It's a kind of cognitive airbag that protects you from shock. When danger or disappointment comes, that small cushion helps reduce the impact, giving you time to react and learn. There is also the matter of self-esteem. Many people naturally have a desire to feel good about themselves, to believe they are capable, deserving, and valuable. Evolutionarily, maintaining a positive self-view could help individuals cope with rejection, failure, and the many challenges of life. If you constantly saw yourself in a harsh, unfiltered light, you might lose the motivation to try, to innovate, or to connect with others. A slightly inflated self-image can give you the courage to venture out, take risks, and ultimately grow. That doesn't mean that you should completely ignore your faults, but it does mean that a little bit of self-deception can sometimes push you to achieve more than you might if you were too focused on every small imperfection. In the realm of decision-making, the same principle applies. When faced with uncertainty, a moderate belief in a positive outcome can be the difference between taking a chance and sitting on the sidelines. Imagine you have an opportunity to try out for a team, start a new project, or join an exciting club. Even if the odds of success are not guaranteed, that hopeful feeling can propel you to take the risk. Over many such moments, that optimism can accumulate into achievements, learning experiences, and ultimately personal growth. Evolution has favored those who can harness this slight bias, because it encourages them to overcome fear and uncertainty, which are inevitable parts of life. Without that spark of optimism, many would never attempt to reach their potential. Yet, there is a fine balance to be maintained. Too much optimism or self-deception can lead to neglecting real dangers or ignoring important information. For instance, if you believe too strongly that you are invincible or that nothing bad will happen, you might take unnecessary risks that could harm you. The key is not to live in a constant state of blind hope, but to allow a little extra positive bias to help you cope, while still staying alert to reality. It's as if you have a built-in moderator that keeps your optimism in check, making sure you're motivated without becoming careless. That moderator is one of the many subtle adaptations our brains have evolved to help us navigate a complex world. Even in our modern lives, where challenges might not involve outrunning a predator, the same principle applies. Think about how you sometimes approach your schoolwork or social challenges. If you're overly critical and focus only on what might go wrong, you might never try. But if you give yourself a little boost, a belief that even if you stumble, you can learn and get better, you are more likely to take on those challenges. That boost is a small illusion, a temporary bending of reality that makes you feel more capable. Over time, those moments build your confidence, which in turn helps you succeed. This cycle of optimism and success is a key reason why evolutionary illusions are so deeply embedded in our minds. Consider also the way our culture reinforces these ideas. Many stories, songs, and movies celebrate the underdog, the person who overcomes impossible odds, through determination and a positive outlook. These cultural narratives, repeated over and over, add to the natural tendency of our minds to focus on the bright side. They remind us that even if reality is not perfect, the hope and effort to change it are what truly matter. When you hear a story of someone who triumphed over adversity, you feel inspired not just by the outcome but by the journey, even if the journey was filled with challenges that you might not have liked. That feeling of inspiration is partly a result of the mental shortcuts that favor optimism over pure objectivity. On a more personal level, these evolutionary illusions can help you deal with daily setbacks. Imagine you're having a rough day at school. Maybe you didn't do as well on a test as you hoped, or a friend wasn't as kind as usual. In those moments, your brain might automatically try to find a silver lining, reminding you of past successes or telling you that one bad day doesn't define you. This built-in resilience can make a huge difference in how you recover and move forward. It's a way for your mind to buffer the impact of disappointment, so that you can try again without being overwhelmed by negativity. That resilience, although it might not be a perfect representation of reality, is a powerful tool for surviving and thriving in a challenging world. At the same time, it's important to recognize that these positive biases are not always helpful. Sometimes, if you ignore too many negative signals, you might end up making choices that aren't in your best interest. For example, if you always convince yourself that everything will work out without considering the real risks, you might end up in trouble. The trick is to use these mental shortcuts in moderation. A bit of optimism can give you the courage to act, but it should be balanced by a realistic appraisal of the situation. Over time, this balanced approach, where you allow your brain to brighten your perspective without completely ignoring reality, has been shaped by evolution because it generally increases your chances of success and survival. Another interesting aspect is how our social environment influences these illusions. When you're part of a supportive community, your natural optimism tends to be reinforced by those around you. Friends, family, and even teachers often encourage you to see the good in yourself and in the world, even when things look bleak. This collective optimism creates a positive feedback loop. If everyone around you is looking at the world with hopeful eyes, you are more likely to do the same. This shared perspective not only helps individuals cope with challenges but also strengthens the bonds between people. In many ways, the social side of evolutionary illusions is just as important as the individual side. Our communities have evolved to support us with a collective sense of hope and positivity, making it easier to face whatever comes next. Technology also plays a role in shaping our modern illusions. With the rise of social media, many people are constantly exposed to carefully curated images of success, happiness, and perfection. These images can create an illusion that everyone else's life is flawless, even if it isn't entirely true. While this might seem like a modern problem, it is really just an extension of the same evolutionary bias that once helped our ancestors stay optimistic in the face of danger. The challenge now is to balance the benefits of a positive outlook with a realistic understanding of your own life. It's a skill that takes practice, learning to appreciate the good without falling prey to unrealistic comparisons or excessive self-criticism. In the end, these evolutionary illusions are not meant to deceive you in a harmful way. Instead, they are part of the natural design of your mind, a design that has allowed humans to survive, adapt, and flourish even in an unpredictable world. They are like little mental helpers, offering you a dose of hope when you need it most, even if that hope isn't perfectly aligned with every detail of reality. By understanding these illusions, you can learn to recognize when they are helping you and when they might be leading you astray. This awareness is a key part of growing as a person, as it teaches you to question your immediate feelings and check them against the facts. Imagine that every time you face a challenge, be it a difficult class, a tough decision, or a personal setback, you have a built-in mechanism that gently nudges you to believe in a positive outcome. That little nudge might be the reason you try again, the reason you don't give up when things get hard. It might be the reason you set out on a new adventure even if the risk is high. In that sense, these illusions are gifts from your evolutionary past, carefully honed over countless generations to give you the strength to overcome obstacles. They are the quiet whispers in your mind that say, "Keep going, you can do it," even when the world seems full of reasons to stop. In the end, the story of evolutionary illusions is a story about the human mind, a story of how our brains have been shaped by the challenges of survival, how they adapt to make life more bearable, and how they sometimes bend reality just enough to give us hope. It's a reminder that while objective truth is important, the way we feel about our lives is shaped by much more than raw data. Our experiences, our memories, and even our dreams are all filtered through the lens of an evolved mind that is designed to keep us moving forward, even when the path is steep. As you continue with this journey, think of these evolutionary illusions as gentle helpers. They don't mean that you are living in a fantasy world, rather, they show that your mind has developed clever ways to cope with a sometimes harsh reality. They are the reason you can smile after a failure, the reason you believe you have a chance even when things look difficult, and the reason you can forge strong bonds with others who share that same hopeful outlook. Understanding these mental shortcuts can empower you to recognize when they are beneficial and when you might need to step back and face the facts more clearly. This insight can also open up new ways of thinking about creativity and innovation. When you allow your mind to see possibilities beyond the strict details of reality, you create room for new ideas. Many great inventions and works of art started as a spark of optimism, an idea that things could be different, that the world could be better than it seems. That spark, that tiny dose of positive illusion, can lead to breakthroughs that transform lives. In this way, evolutionary illusions are not just about making you feel better, they are a crucial part of how humanity has advanced over time. They encourage you to dream big, to take risks, and to push the boundaries of what you think is possible. Of course, the challenge is to keep these illusions in check. If you rely too heavily on them, you might lose touch with reality. The key is to use them as a boost when you need it, but also to ground yourself in the facts. This balance, between hope and realism, is something that evolves over time and with experience. It's a lifelong learning process, one that you can refine as you grow older and face more of life's ups and downs. The more you understand about how your mind works, the better you'll be able to manage that balance, making sure that your optimism propels you forward without blinding you to the challenges you need to overcome. In the end, the evolutionary illusions that help us stay hopeful and resilient are not a sign of weakness or denial of reality. They are a natural part of how the human brain has adapted to a world full of uncertainty and risk. They remind you that sometimes, it's okay to see the world in a slightly brighter light, as long as you also learn to recognize the shadows. This awareness is a tool, one that can help you navigate life with both confidence and caution. By understanding that these mental shortcuts have been honed by evolution, you can appreciate them as part of your natural strength, while also striving to see the whole picture when it matters most. This exploration of evolutionary illusions shows that our minds are complex and wonderfully adaptable. They don't simply record the facts as they are, they shape those facts into a narrative that can lift you up in hard times, inspire you to try new things, and help you build meaningful connections with others. It is a delicate dance between truth and hope, between the cold, hard details of reality and the warm glow of optimism that carries you through each day. Recognizing this dance is the first step to harnessing its power without falling prey to its pitfalls. So, as you go through life, remember that the little optimistic beliefs and self-affirming thoughts you hold onto might be more than just wishful thinking. They could be part of a finely tuned system that has helped people survive, thrive, and innovate over countless generations. They are a gift from your evolutionary past, carefully passed down to help you face the future with courage and creativity. And while it's important to be aware of their limits, it's also crucial to appreciate the comfort and strength they provide. In the end, the story of evolutionary illusions is not one of deception in a negative sense, but one of natural adaptation. It shows how the human brain has evolved to make the best of a challenging world, smoothing out the rough edges of reality just enough to allow you to flourish. Whether you're facing a hard test, a personal setback, or just the everyday ups and downs of life, those little mental boosts can make all the difference. They help you pick yourself up when you fall, encourage you to keep trying even when the odds are against you, and remind you that hope is often the spark that lights the way forward. As we wrap up this part of our journey, take a moment to consider how your own mind has helped you overcome difficulties. Think about times when a positive thought or a little bit of extra self-confidence propelled you to succeed, even when things looked bleak. These moments are not coincidences, they are evidence of the evolutionary wisdom built into your brain. They show that while the objective truth of the world is important, the subjective way you experience and react to that truth is equally vital. And that is why understanding these evolutionary illusions is so valuable. It can help you see not only the world around you more clearly but also your own mind in a new, empowering light. By embracing this perspective, you begin to appreciate that the illusions you sometimes rely on are part of a long tradition of survival and growth. They are the quiet, inner voices that say, "Keep going, you can overcome this," even when the facts seem discouraging. And while it's important to question and challenge these biases when they lead you astray, it's equally important to recognize their role in helping you become the resilient, creative person you are. In this way, evolutionary illusions are not enemies of truth, they are allies in the journey of life, offering you a way to navigate a world that is as unpredictable as it is beautiful. As you continue on your path, you might find that these insights give you a new appreciation for the delicate balance between reality and optimism. They remind you that every time you face a challenge, your mind has already provided you with a little bit of hope, a built-in mechanism that has been perfected over countless generations. That hope is what drives you to try, to learn, and to grow, even when the world seems full of obstacles. And it is that same hope that will continue to guide you, as you keep exploring, questioning, and discovering the incredible complexity of the human experience. In the end, the evolutionary illusions we have explored are not meant to trick you into living in a fantasy, but rather to show you that even the most objective truths are filtered through a mind that has evolved to protect, inspire, and ultimately, help you survive. They are part of the rich tapestry of human cognition, weaving together threads of realism and optimism to create a picture that is both accurate and uplifting. And by understanding these processes, you can better appreciate the ways in which your own mind works to help you face the world every single day. So, as you reflect on these ideas, remember that the brain's tendency to see the world a little more positively than it sometimes is can be a powerful tool. It can motivate you to take risks, build relationships, and overcome setbacks. It can also remind you that while reality is often hard and unpredictable, your inner light, shaped by millions of years of evolution, gives you the strength to move forward. This is the beauty of evolutionary illusions. They are not simply false images, but carefully honed strategies that have helped humanity survive and thrive. And whether you use them consciously or not, they are a fundamental part of what makes you uniquely human. As we close this part of our journey, think about the times when your own mind has given you a little boost, a reassuring thought when you were nervous, a spark of confidence when you needed it most, a smile on a difficult day. Those moments are the legacy of evolution, a legacy that tells the story of countless generations who learned that a bit of optimism can be the key to turning challenges into opportunities. They remind you that, even in the face of a sometimes harsh and unpredictable world, your mind has been finely tuned to help you see the best in life. In understanding evolutionary illusions, you begin to see that our mental shortcuts are not a flaw or a failure of logic, they are a gift. They are the result of a long history of adaptation, designed to help you not only survive but to flourish in a world where the truth can sometimes be overwhelming. They give you the strength to believe in your potential, the courage to face your fears, and the resilience to recover from setbacks. And in that way, they are as real and as valuable as any scientific fact. This part of our exploration, like the others, does not claim to provide all the answers. Instead, it invites you to look at the way your mind works and to appreciate the hidden strengths that have allowed humanity to endure and succeed against all odds. By recognizing the role of evolutionary illusions, you can learn to balance optimism with realism, to use your inner strengths without losing sight of the facts. And in doing so, you become better equipped to navigate the complexities of life, armed with both the truth of the world and the hope that helps you make it through even the toughest times. As you move forward, carry this understanding with you. Let it be a reminder that your mind is a powerful tool, one that has been refined over millions of years to help you thrive in a world that is as challenging as it is beautiful. Cherish the moments when a positive thought lifts you up, and be mindful of times when too much optimism might cloud your judgment. In the end, the goal is not to live in a perfect fantasy but to use your evolved mental strengths to build a life that is both true and full of possibility. That is the essence of evolutionary illusions, a delicate dance between truth and hope that has carried us through countless generations and will continue to light the way for many more to come. At the same time, it's essential to remain grounded. While a bit of optimism is invaluable, too much can be a trap. If you start to ignore real feedback or dismiss warnings because you are too focused on the positive, you could end up hurt. Life is a balance between hope and caution, between the dream of what could be and the facts of what is. The trick is to allow yourself to see the bright side while still keeping one eye on the reality that surrounds you. That balanced view is the result of a long evolutionary process, one that has taught humans to be resilient, resourceful, and ready for the unexpected. In our modern world, the tension between truth and illusion is everywhere. Whether it's the way advertising makes products seem magical, the way movies and TV shows create perfect worlds, or the way social media often shows only the best parts of people's lives, we are constantly bombarded with images and stories that are designed to make us feel good. These images are not necessarily lies, they are just selective, polished versions of reality. They remind us that sometimes, a little bit of illusion can be comforting. But they also remind us to look deeper, to ask whether what you see is the whole truth or just a part of it. Learning to navigate this balance is a skill that can serve you well in all areas of life. It means recognizing that while a sunny outlook can boost your mood and performance, you also need to confront challenges head-on and learn from them. It means understanding that the stories you tell yourself about your abilities and your future can shape your actions, and that sometimes, those stories are more hopeful than factual. Over time, this awareness can help you make decisions that are both optimistic and realistic, giving you the best of both worlds. Even though these ideas may sound like something out of a philosophical textbook or a sci-fi movie, they are very much a part of everyday life. Every day, you experience moments where your mind paints a slightly different picture from the raw facts, when you feel a surge of confidence before a big game, when you remember a day with friends as being better than it was, or when you convince yourself that a setback isn't as bad as it looks. These little mental twists have helped countless people get through hard times, and they continue to do so today. They are part of the secret recipe that has allowed human beings to persevere and succeed, even when the odds were against them. Conclusion: imagine that after a long journey through some of the wildest ideas about what might be hidden beneath our everyday reality, you finally pause to take it all in. You have traveled through puzzles that made you question whether our universe is nothing more than a giant computer program, whether the people around you might sometimes be mere actors with no inner life at all, whether an experience of perfect, endless happiness is truly worth sacrificing the messy, unpredictable beauty of genuine life, and whether the vast cosmos could, by random chance, create a single conscious mind for a brief instant. Now, as we reach the end of this exploration, it's time to gather these threads together and reflect on what they tell us about ourselves, our world, and the nature of truth. All along, we have been invited to question the things we take for granted. Think about the world you see every day, the familiar colors of a sunset, the warm laughter of your friends, the sound of your favorite song. We usually believe that these experiences are built on a solid, unchanging reality. Yet, one possibility we've examined is that this entire world might be generated by advanced computer code. The idea that our universe could be a carefully constructed simulation may seem like the stuff of science fiction at first, but when you look at how far technology has come, from simple pixelated games to nearly lifelike virtual realities, it becomes a question worth pondering. If in the future even ordinary people can create entire digital worlds that feel completely real, then it is not unimaginable that we might already be living in such a program. Although there is no glitch or error that definitively shows we are in a simulation, the very possibility pushes us to re-examine our trust in our senses and the reality they present. Moving deeper into the mystery, we encountered the puzzle of philosophical zombies, beings who act exactly like real people but, in theory, have no inner feelings at all. Imagine watching a friend laugh, cry, or express pain, and yet knowing that behind every gesture, every word, there could be nothing more than a set of programmed responses. This challenge forces us to consider what it really means to be conscious. We naturally assume that when someone shows emotion, they must be experiencing it. But if a creature could mimic every outward sign of feeling without having any genuine experience inside, then how do we truly know that anyone else's inner world exists? This question not only shakes our assumptions about other people but also makes us look inward, reminding us that while we have direct access to our own thoughts and emotions, the reality of another person's mind remains something we can only infer. Then, we turned our attention to the experience machine, a thought experiment that asks whether you would choose a life of flawless, engineered happiness if you could have it. Picture a machine that offers you any experience you desire, every meal tastes amazing, every moment is filled with joy, and every challenge you overcome feels like a carefully scripted triumph. On the surface, that sounds like the ultimate dream. But if every success, every emotion, every high is predetermined by a machine, would that life still have meaning? Many of us cherish the idea that real achievements, even with their struggles and failures, are more valuable than a life of unending, effortless pleasure. The experience machine forces us to ask if the authenticity of our experiences is worth more than the comfort of constant happiness, even if we might never know the difference from within the machine. Next, we looked at one of the strangest ideas of all, the Boltzmann brain. In this scenario, the vastness and age of the universe make it possible that, by pure random chance, a fully formed brain could suddenly appear for a brief moment, complete with all the memories and sensations of a lifetime, only to vanish again. Imagine that for a split second, you awaken with the vivid belief that you have lived a whole life full of experiences, only for that consciousness to flicker out like a faulty light bulb. It is a concept that seems almost comical at first, yet it poses a deep challenge to our confidence in the continuity of our memories and the stability of our past. If the universe is so enormous that even such a bizarre event could occur, how can you be sure that the life you remember isn't just an elaborate illusion, a fleeting burst of activity that happens by chance? While this idea remains highly unlikely, it is a powerful reminder that when we consider the extremes of possibility, even our most cherished certainties can come into question. Finally, we explored how evolution itself might have wired our brains to favor certain illusions, mental shortcuts that help us cope with the challenges of life. Our ancestors faced real dangers every day, from predators to scarcity of food, and sometimes a bit of optimism or a slight distortion of reality could mean the difference between life and death. For instance, the ability to maintain hope in the face of failure or to downplay small setbacks may have spurred early humans to take necessary risks, learn new skills, and ultimately thrive in a harsh environment. This evolutionary bias, which sometimes causes us to see the glass as half full even when it might be half empty, has become a part of how we function. It helps us build confidence when starting a new project, overcome disappointment after a setback, and even form strong bonds with others by believing in the best in them. In everyday life, these mental illusions are like a gentle boost, a secret gift from evolution that helps you face the world with courage and determination. When you think about these evolutionary illusions, consider a time when you felt a surge of confidence before an important exam or a big game. Even if the odds weren't in your favor, that extra bit of hope pushed you to try your best, to persist even when things got tough. That positive bias is not a denial of reality, rather, it is a way for your mind to prepare you for challenges by softening the harshness of immediate failure. It's similar to how a sports team might rally together with a shared belief that they can win against all odds, even if the statistics suggest otherwise. That shared optimism not only helps individuals push through personal difficulties but also strengthens the bonds within a community, making everyone more resilient in the face of challenges. As we gather all these ideas together, one thing becomes clear: each of these thought experiments, whether it's the simulation hypothesis, philosophical zombies, the experience machine, the Boltzmann brain, or the role of evolutionary illusions, invites you to question the boundaries between what is real and what might be a comforting illusion. They don't necessarily provide definitive answers, rather, they expand your imagination and encourage you to think more deeply about how you experience life. They remind you that while the world often appears solid and unchanging, it might actually be far more flexible and mysterious than you have ever assumed. These puzzles are not meant to leave you in a state of constant doubt or to make you worry that nothing is truly real. Instead, they serve as gentle challenges to your everyday assumptions, pushing you to look beyond the surface. Even if you decide that your world is as real as it gets, the very act of questioning reinforces your understanding of the things you take for granted. It's like stepping back from a painting to appreciate all the tiny brushstrokes that, together, create a beautiful scene. By examining these radical ideas, you begin to see that every experience you have, every joy, every setback, every connection with another person, is part of a larger, wondrous tapestry that is both incredibly detailed and yet, in some ways, beautifully simple. Perhaps the most important lesson from these thought experiments is that certainty is hard to come by. You might be convinced that the table in front of you is real, that your memories are genuine, and that the feelings you have are authentic. And for most purposes, that is exactly how you live your life. But by entertaining these what-if scenarios, you learn that even the most solid-seeming truths are built on assumptions that can be questioned. This doesn't mean that you should abandon your everyday life or stop trusting your senses. Instead, it opens you up to the possibility that reality is layered. There might be hidden depths that you never knew existed. And sometimes, exploring those depths can lead to new insights, spark creativity, and even help you make better decisions. Think about the times when you've faced unexpected challenges, a sudden change in plans, a surprise test, or a disagreement with a friend. In those moments, a little optimism or a belief in a better outcome can make a huge difference. Even if things don't turn out perfectly, that positive outlook might help you learn, adapt, and grow stronger. It's as if your mind has its own built-in safety net that cushions you against the full weight of reality, allowing you to take risks and pursue your dreams without being overwhelmed by fear. That safety net is one of the gifts of evolution, honed over countless generations to help people not only survive but flourish. At the same time, these mental shortcuts have a cost. If you rely too heavily on them, you might miss important details or ignore warning signs that could help you avoid mistakes. For example, if you convince yourself that nothing bad will happen, you might take risks that end up causing harm. If you remember only the good parts of a day and forget the lessons from the bad parts, you might not learn as much as you could. The trick is to use these illusions as temporary boosts, a way to give yourself extra strength when you need it, but not to let them distort your view of reality permanently. The challenge is to find a balance between optimism and realism, so that you can enjoy the best of both worlds. Culturally, this balance is reflected in the stories, movies, and songs we cherish. Many of these works celebrate the underdog, the person who overcomes difficulties through perseverance and hope, even when the odds are against them. They remind you that a touch of self-deception, seeing the world in a slightly better light than it might objectively be, can inspire you to take action and improve your situation. These cultural narratives reinforce the natural biases of our minds, making it easier to build a community of support and resilience. They show that while hard truths are important, the capacity to dream, to hope, and to believe in a better tomorrow is equally vital. Even modern technology plays a role in this delicate dance between reality and illusion. Think about the way social media often presents an idealized version of life, a series of snapshots that capture moments of happiness and success, while conveniently leaving out the struggles and imperfections. That curated view can boost your mood and inspire you, but it can also set unrealistic expectations that make you feel like you're missing out. Recognizing this, you learn to appreciate the real, messy, unpredictable life you lead, with all its ups and downs. It teaches you that while a perfect image is comforting, true growth often comes from facing challenges head-on and learning from them. At its core, the exploration of evolutionary illusions is a story about the human mind, a story of how your brain has evolved to protect, motivate, and ultimately help you survive in a world full of uncertainties. It shows that the way you perceive reality is not a fixed, unchangeable thing, but a dynamic process that can shift with the situation. When you're excited about something or when you're trying to overcome a setback, your mind might amplify the positive and soften the negative. That ability is not a sign of weakness or delusion, it's a survival strategy that has been refined over millions of years. It gives you the courage to try, the strength to persist, and the creativity to imagine possibilities even in the darkest moments. This journey through the hidden workings of your mind is not meant to trick you into living in a fantasy world. Rather, it's a way to help you see that even the most reliable experiences are, in part, the product of your own inner processes that have been shaped by the needs of survival and the drive to overcome hardship. It's like learning that the favorite song you sing along to is not just a series of notes, but a melody that has been passed down through generations, carrying with it the hopes and dreams of countless people who, in their own way, believed that a better day was always possible. That melody, though it may smooth over some of the harsher notes of life, does not rob you of reality, it enriches it. As you reflect on all of this, you begin to understand that the puzzles we have explored, from the possibility of a simulated universe to the idea of beings without inner lives, from the temptation of an experience machine to the fleeting existence of a Boltzmann brain, and finally to the natural illusions that help you cope, are not just abstract theories or mind games. They are ways of looking at the world that invite you to question, to wonder, and to appreciate the incredible complexity of life. They show you that, while reality might sometimes be a bit messy or unpredictable, your mind has evolved ingenious ways to help you not only deal with that mess but to find beauty and meaning in it. You learn that even when things seem hard or uncertain, the little voices of hope and optimism in your mind are there to lift you up. They remind you that every challenge is an opportunity to learn, every failure is a stepping stone to success, and every setback is a chance to grow. These are not lies or deceptions, they are natural adaptations that help you thrive. And as you continue to face the world, you come to see that this delicate balance between truth and optimism is what makes life both challenging and wonderfully unpredictable. In the end, the message of our journey is simple. While it's important to seek the truth and understand the world as it is, it's equally important to allow yourself a little bit of hope, a touch of self-deception, and a generous dose of optimism. These qualities do not make you less real or less honest, they make you human. They are the very things that have enabled people to rise above adversity, innovate in the face of challenges, and build communities that support one another. They remind you that even if the universe were as complex and mysterious as the wildest thought experiments suggest, the way you experience it, your laughter, your tears, your dreams, and your struggles, is a gift worth cherishing. As you move forward from here, let these ideas inspire you to keep questioning, and to keep your mind open to new possibilities. Whether you decide that our world is a genuine, physical reality or that it might be a brilliant simulation, whether you believe that every person you meet has a rich inner life or you wonder if there might be empty shells among us, remember that these puzzles are not meant to give you all the answers. Instead, they are meant to spark your curiosity, challenge your assumptions, and remind you that the process of seeking knowledge is a journey without a final destination. By embracing the mystery and the complexity of your own mind, you can learn to balance hope with realism. You begin to see that the positive illusions that help you overcome challenges are not failures of logic, but rather remarkable adaptations that have enabled human beings to flourish despite the hardships of life. They are the quiet heroes of your inner world, the subtle boosts that give you the courage to try, the determination to persevere, and the creativity to imagine a better tomorrow. So, as you close this chapter of our exploration, carry with you the realization that life is a rich tapestry woven from both hard truths and gentle illusions. Every moment of joy, every instance of struggle, every flash of inspiration is part of that tapestry. And while you may never have all the answers about the ultimate nature of reality, you have the power to shape your own experience with the knowledge that even the most delicate illusions are a testament to the incredible resilience and ingenuity of the human mind. This is the beauty of our journey together. It shows you that reality is not a static, unchanging thing, but a living, breathing canvas on which your thoughts, feelings, and experiences are painted. The challenges and puzzles we've explored are like different colors on that canvas, sometimes bold and surprising, sometimes soft and subtle, but always part of a larger picture that is uniquely yours. They encourage you to look beyond the surface of everyday life, and to appreciate the hidden depths that make each moment precious. Remember that every time you face a tough day, every time you doubt your own strength, the little voices of hope inside you, those evolutionary gifts, are there to help you push through. They have been with you since the very beginning of your journey on this earth, passed down from countless generations who learned that even a small dose of optimism can light the way through darkness. And as you continue to grow and learn, these inner strengths will help you navigate the uncertainties of life with grace and resilience. In the end, our exploration of these surreal philosophical puzzles is not about proving that one idea is right and another is wrong. It is about opening up a space in your mind where you can wonder, reflect, and ultimately appreciate the mystery of it all. It is a call to remain curious, to challenge your assumptions, and to recognize that sometimes the most powerful lessons come from the questions we ask rather than the answers we receive. So, as you step back into your everyday world, whether you see it as a physical reality, a sophisticated simulation, or something in between, carry with you the knowledge that your mind is an incredible tool. It has the power to see beauty in uncertainty, to find meaning in the struggle, and to transform even the most complicated puzzles into opportunities for growth. Let the insights you've gained remind you that while life may be full of unanswered questions, it is also full of wonder, hope, and the endless possibility to learn something new every day. May you move forward with a renewed sense of curiosity and a deeper appreciation for the complexities of both the world and your own inner life. In a universe that might be more mysterious than we can ever fully understand, the one thing that remains absolutely real is your ability to wonder, to dream, and to strive for truth, even when the answers seem just out of reach. That, after all, is the most extraordinary adventure of all.